Chapter 726. Rizzo knew that such a wound couldn't heal so fast, and that Litha's left side was currently exposed. He lunged his blade at Litha's weak point, only for a silvery clash to stop him in his tracks. Litha's wings were coated in orichalcum as well, and since he couldn't move his left arm properly, he had shielded himself with his wing. Being upside down, they almost resembled a hand with the thumb pointing down, allowing Lith to flex the upper part of his wings so to grab the enemy weapon. Before Rizzo managed to free the blade by twisting it and ripping part of the wings to shreds, Litha's right fist struck at the ODI's kidney, just in time to dodge a horizontal slash that would otherwise chop his head off. Floria and Quilla didn't miss the opening, unleashing a burst of lightning that almost brought Rizzo to his knees. He had yet to activate the green array again because once set, he couldn't move it. Without a solid strategy, Litha's origin flames would have damaged it before he could exploit the advantage that gods will grant it to him. Also, the array was very mana expensive, and with the reactor down, Rizzo couldn't afford to waste what energy he had left. The moment his opponent faltered, Lith took a gatekeeper prototype out of his pocket dimension and lunged for the kill. Alas, Rizzo's title of Blade Master wasn't just for show. The ODI managed to ignore the shock thanks to sheer willpower and deflected the prototype, striking at the point where the metal was thinner. The difference in quality between the blades coupled with Rizzo's skill allowed him to break Litha's weapon and use the recoil from the clash to launch a counterattack at the same time. The attack was too fast and too close for Lith to dodge it, so he had to once again resort to using his metal-coated wings as shields. Much to everyone's surprise, the inner part of the wings was covered in faces twisted in anger and pain that could be seen moving right below its black membrane. Countless black arms made of darkness and spirit magic erupted from the wings, attempting to grab both the sword and its wielder. Rizzo managed to cut them all before they could touch him, but at that point, the strength of his attack had been neutralized. \U003C What's happening? \U003E Rizzo asked more to the ODI who shared the body with him rather than to the humans. \U003C Where are these things coming from? \U003E More and more black arms came out from the surrounding darkness as the lost souls found a way to exploit their link with Lith to use demons of darkness in his stead. Soon there were more than just arms, but also heads and full bodies as well. Die, Lith replied, joining the onslaught. Thanks to the cover that the shadows offered to him, Lith managed to get close enough to lunge with his claw at Rizzo's right lung, where the sphere that allowed him to conjure the gods' will array was hidden. Even among the red sea of rage possessing him, Lith was aware that without the artifact, the enemy would be at his complete mercy. With just Tier 3 spells at his disposal, not even a Blade Master would last more than a few seconds. Is that really Lith? Quilla asked, finally recognizing the familiar voice. Until that moment, snarls and roars had prevented her to understand who she should root for. She had previously aimed her bolt of lightning against Rizzo only because it was what Floria had done. Yes. Floria nodded. She instinctively tried to reach for her sword before remembering that the ODI had taken it away from her. We have to help him. He can't win without a weapon. Quilla was about to reply that she begged to differ since his claws had pierced through the damaged armor and the ODI's flesh, spraying blue blood everywhere, when Rizzo reactivated God's will in the nick of time before Litha's fingers could close around the sphere. A wind push as strong as a tornado sent Lith crashing against the wall while the vengeful shadows were dispersed. The God's will array allowed Rizzo to manipulate mana, not the lost souls inhabiting them. Rizzo could have used fire or lightning to kill him, but since the monster appeared to be immortal, if the attack failed and the thing still managed to take the God's will from him, even the female humans might have been able to kill him. I don't want to stay here, Solus said. How do I get back to Lith? Journey Mogre laughed with a sweet and silvery voice that would have been soothing if it didn't come from someone with Journey's features. It sounded mostly creepy. You're so funny, child. I already told you. That's your mind, Mogre pointed at Solus's human form. And there's your body. She was now pointing at the arm protector visible on Litha's right arm, covering him from the hand to the shoulder. Do the math. Solus still had a lot of questions, yet Floria was right. Lith couldn't win without a weapon. Also, Mogre was right. With a broken life force and apparently also a broken soul, without her Lith was at risk of being possessed by the undead that he was currently manipulating. She walked toward Lith, looking at her slender, pink hands one last time before overlapping her body with his own. "Get up, we don't have a second to lose," she thought. There were countless things that she wanted to say to him, but that wasn't the time nor the place. Rizzo had realized the threat that the two female humans now posed to the ODI's lives, and with the body-swapping machine destroyed, they had no use for them anymore. He dispelled the god's will, conjuring it again so that it enveloped the area between him and his prey. Floria and Quilla were at its fringes, but having their backs against the wall they couldn't escape. Not before he reached them and cut them down. Rizzo was at the opposite side, darting through the array, leaving no blind spot that Lith could use to stop him. The two women attempted to blink, but the magical formation prevented them to. Lith had yet to recover from the joy and shock to have Solus back, yet he could already feel his heart squeezing from pain. He was about to lose one of his closest friends and the only woman that he might have ever loved. His body moved faster than his mind and faster than Rizzo. The ODI's elemental fusion was more powerful, but Lith's body was stronger and his limbs longer. It allowed Lith to reach Floria and Quilla before his enemy. "Solus, I know that I can beat him, but I need your help. There's one last trick that I didn't dare to attempt before, because it will put your body at great risk, and I hoped that giving you some time to heal would allow you to recover." "Thank heavens, I was right. I know that it's unfair to ask you to suffer again, even though you've just returned, but I know, and I'm deeply grateful for everything you've said and done for me. But now stop wasting time. I trust you with all of my heart, so do what you must." Solus cut him short. "We'll face this enemy like we faced, and we'll face anyone who stands in our path, together." Chapter 727. "Begone!" Lith screamed at Rizzo while using his wings to cover his arms, creating a multi-layered protection to stop the incoming slash. Rizzo laughed at the monster's stupidity. This way he could kill all three of them in one fell swoop. He activated the powers of his eternal blade, fueling them with an enormous amount of the power that the reactor still had left. The ODI's masterpiece was now surrounded by a white aura, strong enough to literally cut the air in front of it, and even to split matter down to an atomic level. Lith's black wings evaporated, unable even to withstand the intense heat and power the eternal blade emitted. "Wait, why are the wings black?" "Gonna point it out." She was a genius on Solus's level, so she couldn't possibly miss what was happening. "What the heck are you saying? This scourge has always been red and black." Rizzo ignored her remark, putting all of his weight and focus behind the strike. "The monster, yes, but his armor was silver." "Where's its armor?" Gunna had noticed that Lith's wings were back to being pitch black, only made of flesh and bone. The answer to her question came in the form of a silvery sound as the eternal blade was pushed away by an unstoppable force. Rizzo could only curse at his stupidity when he saw that the armor wasn't the only thing to have disappeared. The arm protector was gone as well, and, in their stead, there was a silver bastard sword between Lith's hands. Its shape reminded Floria of the gatekeeper, but it was clearly made of orichalcum and had a green and a yellow mana crystal on its hilt instead of two blue crystals. Lith had made Solus's stone body took the form of his once prized blade and given her the entirety of the Skinwalker armor to protect her from harm. As the final step, by injecting his mana inside the armor, he gave to the makeshift weapon the same properties of mana-boosted orichalcum. Yet Solus was more than what even the gatekeeper once was. Not only could she channel Lith's elemental fusion, but also add her own, further enhancing all the blades and orichalcum's properties. The adamant alloy was semi-liquid, so no matter how many times the eternal blade's aura pushed the liquid metal aside, new orichalcum kept flowing to replace the missing parts while its energy field clashed with Rizzo's weapon. Lith's strength plus Solus's while combining their fusion magic was enough to almost rip the eternal blade off Rizzo's hands. Both blades were now above their masters' heads, but only one of the fighters still had a firm grip and both hands on his weapon's hilt. Lith's body was wounded and battered, his mana almost depleted. Too long had passed from the last time he had used invigoration, and even more since he had actually slept. Yet thoughts of his broken existence back on Earth were filling every corner of Lith's mind. Almost losing solace had reopened all of his old wounds. It had reminded him of the differences between the loveless world, devoid of anything worth living for, that he had left behind in Mogar, which was filled with people who needed him. Rizzo was now defenseless from his midriff to his chin, yet it wouldn't last for long. Lith moved his blade in a downward diagonal slash to cut Rizzo from his right shoulder to his left hip. Even if with only one hand, Rizzo managed to strike at the Solace Keeper with his own blade, preventing the cut from being deep by pushing the edge down and away before it could pierce his organs. With his other hand, Rizzo imitated the spell that Jaira had previously used and emitted from his palm a red beam of concentrated first magic aimed at Lith's heart. If the striking the head doesn't work, this thing must be like a vampire, Rizzo thought. Burning his heart should do the trick. The green array made the beam too fast and powerful to be dodged, not that Lith would have done it even if he could. Rizzo had almost taken solace away from him. Lith wouldn't let anything happen to Floria or Quilla. No matter how powerful, that thing is still fucking chore magic. Lith thought as his red eye burned with mana of the same color, infusing both solace and the enemy's spell. The red light born from the eye tilted the beam enough that his blade's aura was enough to push it aside. Lith adjusted his grip on the Solace Keeper, following the motion from the previous attack to draw it near his chest in a horizontal stance, and then lunged at the enemy. The combined beam parry and sword stab took Rizzo by surprise. He tried to deflect the Solace Keeper again, but his one-handed grip was too weak compared to Lith's double-handed form. Lith's blade pierced his chest, forcing Rizzo to fly back to not be impaled. Stick to what you know, you moron. Gonna scold at him. You're no mage. Your control over first magic is pathetic at best, and that thing has 3 eyes flaring with mana. Judging by their colors, you have to avoid fire, darkness, and water magic. What do you want me to do, then? Heal him. Rizzo rebuked while a jet stream of origin flames tried to strike at him, only to be stopped by both the gods' will array and a bolt of thunder. No, you idiot. Use your damn blade and the advantage that having hostages gives you. He stood still to defend the women before so. She stopped the moment she noticed that Quilla and Floria hadn't remained idly. They had used Lith's cover to get out of the array and free him from the need to fight inside the magical formation. Damn, why am I the only one who is partnered with idiots? Gonna thought. Lith followed his enemy, and now that everyone was out of the array, God's will was reduced to be just a tacky decoration on the floor. Rizzo used the thunderbolt from his blade again, but without the array, it was just a peak tier 3 spell that Lith deflected with a flick of his blade. Once the two men were engaged again in close quarters combat, the difference in weapons soon became overwhelming. Just like the skinwalker armor protecting her, Solace had no definite shape. She adapted after each clash, making the parts of the blade that Lith used to block thicker at the right moment and shape-shifting it to be shaper and more curved whenever a hit connected, causing a deeper wound. Rizzo had a hard time following the Solace Keeper's movements, mostly because the blade kept changing its form, making it hard for him to hit its tip to easily deflect an attack. First it was double-edged, then single-edged, and now it's a goddamned curved sword. What the heck of a weapon is that? Rizzo had to predict both the movements of the Solace Keeper and its wielder, who despite being less skilled than the Blade Master had a vastly superior physical prowess. Quilla didn't understand anything of what was happening, so she focused on Lith's non-yellow eyes and the enemy's array, trying to find a way to help her friend. Floria instead was in awe for his performance. She had often heard the term being one with the sword, but it was the first time she was actually seeing it. Solace wasn't just a powerful magical artifact, it was also part of Lith's body, allowing him to bring all of his techniques to a new peak. Chapter 728. Floria's amazement didn't stop her from also using her brain. Afraid that their enemy could once again steal the power of their spells, Floria used earth magic to change the pattern of the floor to Lith's advantage, making it slippery where Rizzo was and rough where Lith stood, giving her friend a better footing. Sometimes she would make small bumps appear where she predicted the ODI would move, making him almost trip more than once. Fighting 3 against 1 without the green array was too much for Rizzo. He conjured it again, but before it could fully form, the eternal blade was ripped off his hands, quickly followed by his head. Lith knew what was going to happen, So he quickly stepped out of the array as Rizzo's remaining life force was detonated to buy the time necessary for the next ODI to step out. I need to rest, sorry. Solus slipped back to Litha's finger and the skinwalker back on his body. Between her near-death experience and her weak core, Lith was surprised that she had lasted for so long. He gave Solus his most heartfelt thanks while hurling a constant stream of origin flames against the green array. By the time the explosion had faded and Vega's body was fully formed, the magical formation was in shambles. /U003C Rizzo, you damn idiot. /U003E Vega said, taking her magical staff out of her dimensional ring. Thanks to the array's power-amplifying effects, her Tier 3 spell filled the room with ice shards as big as a person, giving her prey no chance to escape. Floria used her Tier 4 Earth spell, Tidal Wall, to make the ground in front of her and her allies rise like a wave, buying Lith enough time for a full breath of invigoration. Vega sneered at the ugly female's attempts to stall for time, conjuring one volley of shards after another, in a constant onslaught that soon brought the magical protection on the verge of crumbling. She didn't care about how much mana was left in the reactor. The only thing that mattered was her own survival. Lith pondered his options, trying to find a way out of that pinch. Damn it, that's a spell worthy of the name Checkmate Spears. I can't warp and do to the array, and since the offensive spell covers the entire room, I have no place to dodge. I could tank a wave or two, but I would die long before reaching that crazed mage. He thought. Quilla shared his opinion, but while Lith had fought putting his life on the line, she had done the best that she could to study the Gods Will array. Quilla was no warden, but she knew the array detecting spell and how magical formations worked. She also knew many more runes than Floria, especially those the ODI used due to her thorough study of their magical discoveries. After seeing the green array being used so many times and how the various missing runes affected its working, she had a pretty good idea of how to make the assault stop. She focused her disarray spell on a single rune near one of the array's power nodes, triggering a domino effect that the already faltering magical formation wasn't able to bear. Its structure collapsed, reverting the above Tier 5 spell into an average Tier 3. When Vega realized that despite the fact that the God's Will was still standing, its effects had completely disappeared, it was too late. Lith exploited that opening to warp in front of her, ripping the sphere from her chest with his left hand and squashing her head like grape with his right hand. Without the God's Will array, there was no need to dodge the life force explosion, so he could breathe a stream of origin flames that engulfed the corpse and smothered the detonation. While the next ODI was still forming, Lith ripped her heart off before hurling a new jet of flames. He kept killing them nonstop, even though he felt that something was wrong. Invigoration or not, he had never used origin flames so many times, and his instincts screamed at him to stop. His life force was close to suffering more damage. /U003C please, have mercy. /U003E Guna said when her turn came. /U003C, you are killing an entire race. This is genocide. /U003E. Litha's reply was to tear her asunder before stepping back to avoid the ensuing explosion. His eyes were blurring and his strength dwindling, yet he didn't dare stop his work. Only the ODI could actually see that as more of them died, the eyes in the room converged into a single point until they assumed a physical form that got closer and closer until they could feel its breath down their necks. The black hands had disappeared once the spirits of the dead had been dispelled by the God's Will array, but now Moger's consciousness had coalesced to be ready to take her prize, leaving only the darkness originating from Lith behind. Each of their forced rebirths drained more mana from the reactor until nothing remained. Without its nourishment, the lump of flesh in front of Lith stopped squirming as time finally moved forward and demanded its toll from the ODI. Their collective body withered and aged until they all turned into dust. Only then did Moger disappear. Finally, its mistake had been mended, and over time, from all that death life would blossom again. Along with the planet's consciousness, both the silver and the black pillar disappeared, leaving Lith back into his human form. Well, that was interesting, Solark said. I'd say it was worth the trip. Really? I think the fight was really good as well, But from a battle-crazed warrior like you, I was expecting a lot of criticism about that poor kid. Tyrus said. Also, the only effective part of the ODI's plan was managing to hide themselves from us. Reactor or not, they wouldn't have stood a chance. I'm not talking about the fight, even though I have to admit it was pretty decent. I was referring to the anomaly's companion speaking with Mogur. It rarely speaks to non-guardians. By the way, what do you think the two pillars mean? She asked while looking at Li Gain. It's a good sign. The first time the anomaly underwent a tribulation, the pillar was black, like that of an abomination. Now there's also a silver one, which probably depends on the fact that he's not technically a beast, and we've never seen the pillar related to humans. I think the two pillars mean that his nature is getting more stable, no more lost in between species, but giving birth to a race of his own. Li Gain replied. It's more than that. Mogur materialized in the middle of its guardians, appearing to each one of them in the form it had assumed back when they had met the planet's consciousness for the first time. To Salark it appeared as a blood-stained beast, to Tyrus like a pregnant woman, and to Li Gain as the world tree. Both hybrids are conflicted about their nature and are troubled to accept the changes they are still undergoing. Yet while the female is driven by her feelings and hindered by her memory loss, the male is almost a lost cause. He keeps living in the past, carrying a burden that drags him down no matter what choice he makes. That's why he still carries the mark of abominations. Chapter 729. At the same time, the male hybrid fights for his future. It allows him to move forward and accept the change, rather than trying to foolishly bring back a forever lost past. It'll be interesting to see which side he'll choose, if he ever makes his mind. Mogur said, Are you saying that he might remain a hybrid? Salark asked. I always thought that hybrid was just a temporary state of the spawn of powerful species before they reach maturity. And you were right. Mogur nodded. But things are different now, and so am I. A hybrid is now walking the path towards guardianhood, and even the abominations I had forsaken as a lost cause have managed to evolve into something new. Things are changing pretty fast for my standards, and only time could tell if it's for the better or the worse. Meanwhile, inside the body-swapping room, Lith was fighting to retain his consciousness. His cracked life force was on the verge of breaking, his stamina was depleted, and all the mana he had left wasn't enough to light a candle. Lith had fought, ran, and cast spells non-stop for hours now, to the point that invigoration would bring him back to less than 20% of his max strength. The fight with the ODI, with the necessity to constantly keep the Skinwalker armor in its boosted state, had drained his energies like never before. Are you all right, Lith? Floria asked while helping him to lie down on the floor. Are you all right, Solus? Lith was still so scared from almost losing her that he constantly checked on her condition. I'm peachy, stop asking me that. She giggled. I'm fine. I just need to sleep for a few hours. A week tops. He replied to Floria. Shit. Quilla was kneeling right next to him, checking his vitals. This is really bad. He needs absolute rest. He's this close to further reducing his lifespan. She then blew away the nearby pile of dust that once had been the lost ODI race and imprinted Elka's dimensional ring, taking back all of her stuff and Floria's. Quilla had brought several potions with her, some of which were needed to stabilize the life force of a patient after a body sculpting procedure. She forced Lith to drink a tonic, a stabilizer, and then she used Tier 4 light magic to make sure that his body had the necessary energy to recover from its many wounds. All the damage his wings sustained had been carried to his human form as open cuts on Lith's back. Lith protested for a second or two before the strain from the healing process and the stress from the fight made him fall asleep. Only once Quilla was certain that both Lith's body and his life force were out of danger did she allow herself to relax. We have a lot of catching up to do, she said while throwing a meaningful look at her sister. You two have a lot of explaining to do, but right now I'm too tired and too happy to care about answers. She hugged Floria, enjoying her warmth. While she was working in the mana reactor's control room, Quilla had hated herself for abandoning Floria in the hands of the ODI. She knew that Lith would have done anything to defend her, but to Quilla that wasn't an excuse. She had no idea what Lith was, but, in her eyes, being a little inhuman was a small price to pay if it meant being powerful enough to protect those she loved. Then, she checked Lith's condition one last time before falling asleep as well. Even if the red chains had healed the hole in her chest, her stamina was depleted by all the healing she had performed, and the life force she had passed to Lith taking care of those two golems had taken quite a toll on her mana as well. Floria's physical condition was pretty good thanks to Lith invigorating her after killing Gyra. She armed herself to the teeth, standing guard in the case that more constructs, magical beasts, or whatever the ODI had left might pop its ugly head up and threaten their lives. When the metal doors opened, her blade moved too fast that Morok's neck started to bleed even before he managed to notice the wound that the tip of her estoc had opened. First your sister kicks me in the nuts so hard that I don't know if I'm still able to have children, and now you almost turn me into a kebab? What's wrong with you, Ernest? He asked while pushing the blade away with a finger. Have you ever heard of knocking? Not only it's a very polite thing to do, but also prevents others from thinking you're a fucking enemy, trying to sneak inside and finish us off. She said. Point taken. Can we leave now? I'm sick of this place, and I've no idea if there are more golems left. Floria pondered about her options. Normally, she would worry about rescuing her soldiers and the apprentices, but the fact that they had left with no care for her well-being while even Morok had come to help royally pissed her off. We have to wait until their condition stabilizes a bit. Then we get the heck out of here. That was how long she was willing to wait for her comrades to return. They were all perfectly healthy, whereas Lith needed medical attention. Do you want me to look around for our runaway friends while you guys rest? Morok asked. No, I can't take on several magical beasts at once or a flesh golem and defend them at the same time. I need you here. Don't worry, I counted them. If those that attacked us back in the living quarters were all of them, there are only 2 left. If they are smart, they'll keep away from us. Quilla and I killed one on our own. Floria said. Even better. Then there's only 1 left. The chances it attacks us are almost. Shit. His optimism died as the metal door opened again, letting the last golem in. Solus was very tired, but she was incapable of sleeping outside of her tower, so she was watching and hearing everything in the room. Maybe Lith is right. Maybe jinxing stuff really is possible. She thought. Yet the construct moved slowly, its arms raised in the air and its power core was exposed, protruding from its stone shell. Now that every single ODI was dead, the imprint on the slave runes carved into its life force had disappeared. It was now free to do whatever it wanted as long as it didn't clash with its protocols, like self-harming. Seeing the pain and anguish in the eyes of the man grafted to the construct, Floria's hand hesitated. Killing out of mercy was different from doing it out of self-defense. /U003C, please, IN, /U003. The creature attempted to say while using sheer willpower to hold back its screams of pain. Morok had no such problems. He had seen enough golems for a lifetime and couldn't wait to retire. His hammers smashed the power core, putting the creature out of its misery. He was trying to say something. Floria said. Then it should have talked faster. I'm not putting at risk the last Royal Forge Master. I mean, my precious friends for a dead man walking. Morok hoped that Floria wouldn't notice the greed with which he was staring at the silver wand in her pocket. Chapter 730. By the time Lith woke up, all members of the expedition had returned. They had mustered the courage to check the outcome of the battle only after they had realized that they had no way to open the closed doors. Quilla returned them their items from Elkaz's dimensional amulet, and Floria took Morok with her to explore what remained of the room. Gaku was still alive, and she couldn't afford to leave their back exposed to the alleged traitorous mage. She didn't have to search for long since the missing professor's corpse was waiting for them in the next room. No one would even know that just like the ODI, their slave seal on their victim's life force required the mana reactor to work. The moment the device had run out of power, the spells engraved in Gaka's life force had consumed her life in the attempt to prolong their existence. Floria stored the corpse in her dimensional amulet. Traitor or not, she didn't deserve to be left there to rot. After Quilla checked Litha's condition, Morok warped them all to the Tech's breeding facility, and Floria activated the dimensional runes until she found one that led to a safe corridor. No one had any desire to walk until they found a way back to the surface. So after Floria marked the rune on the outside so that Royal Forge Master could spot it and easily get access to Kulla's lower floors, they used earth magic to dig their way out. From that point, returning home was easy. As soon as the army could pinpoint their communication amulets again, Commander Berrien sent a rescue team to their position. Less than an hour later, the members of the expedition had said their goodbyes and had been sent to their homes. Lith was brought to the Erna's household since Quilla refused to let him go anywhere until she was certain that his life force was stable. His lifespan was unaffected by the strain of fighting a literal one-man army of ODI, and she hadn't got some answers from him. Camilla was overjoyed from seeing him and appalled by his condition. "Good gods, you look terrible," she said while looking at his pale face and battered body. Even though Lith had eaten non-stop since he had regained his consciousness, to reattach his arm and heal all of his wounds had made him lose a few kilograms. "I missed you too, babe," he said, holding her tight for a few seconds before giving her a passionate kiss. After feeling so close to death for so long, he needed to feel alive again. "Stop right there." Quilla separated them. "No action of any kind is allowed to you until you have recovered. You're too weak for anything more romantic than a hug. Healer's orders. Can we at least eat together? We both need to get some weight back," Lith asked, prompting Floria's stomach to rumble in agreement. She had been too tense to eat properly after escaping from Kulla. The three of them told their story in turns during the late dinner they consumed with Orion and Journey, soon joined by Lith's family that wanted to see him as soon as the Journey informed them of his condition. Later, when Camilla and Lith were cuddling in their bed, Lith couldn't stop thinking that the Ernas had accommodated him in the very same room where years ago he had spent his first night with Floria on purpose. Sharing that bed with another woman was really awkward for him. "How is Zinnia doing?" he asked, trying to find a way to introduce the topic he really cared about. During the last few weeks, Lith had shared so much with Floria, and now even Quilla knew part of his secret. Yet Camilla, the most important woman in his life, was still completely in the dark. He would have lost her at the hands of Falmug if not for Journey, but due to the distance separating them and the countless impending threats at the time, he had failed to realize the real meaning of such an event. After almost losing solace, after finally holding Camilla between his arms, looking at her pale and gaunt skin, he now understood how fragile human life was. "She's doing pretty well. Falmug's death was a huge shock for her, but I think that having her children back made her too happy to waste even a moment of her time grieving. She also received all of his possessions as compensation from the abuses Falmug inflicted upon her over the years. Between Vaster's testimony and Falmug's attempt on my life, the judge had no qualms imposing the maximum sentence. Is she still at my parents' home, or has she gone back to her house? Are you kidding? Neither Zinnia nor her children want to step foot again in that horrid place. She's selling the house and everything within it to get a fresh start. Zinnia has moved to Lucia now, to stay as far away as possible from Falmug's family and our own." "What? Where?" Lith asked. The implications of that piece of news startled him a bit. "She's bought a house near yours, so our families are neighbors now." Camilla blushed a little, but hid her embarrassment by burying her face in his shoulder. "Your parents did a lot for her, and she has fallen in love with the warm climate of the South. She can now afford a tutor for both herself and the kids to get them homeschooled. They've been apart for so long that she wants to make up for the lost time and give them the freedom they never experienced. Their grandparents weren't as harsh as Falmug was, but so far their childhood has been reduced solely to fear and duty. They deserve to know happiness as well as their mother. It's all thanks to you, you know. First, you gave her sight, and then you gave Zinnia her life back." Camilla snuggled up to Lith, searching for his embrace. "Nope, it was all thanks to you, Cammy. It was you who never stopped fighting for her, even at the cost of your personal safety. By the way, there's something I'd like to tell you." "Is this about me losing too much weight? Do I really look that bad?" she asked. Embarrassment was the only thing that gave a bit of color to her face. "No, but actually yes. I mean, you're bordering on putting at risk your assets. You can't afford to skip even one meal. The fate of Mogr depends on it," Lith replied with an overly dramatic tone while checking her goods. "Stop it," she moaned. "You heard your healer. You need rest. This is no foreplay, just a medical examination that I'm conducting as your personal healer. We can always call Quilla if you need a second opinion." "Pervert, that's not your professional face," she said before giving him a slow, deep kiss. "Is it important?" she asked, receiving a serious nod in reply. "Can it wait, please? I've already had too many emotions for today. The only thing I want right now is to enjoy your company and the first happy moment I have since Falmug's attack. It can wait. Lith said. That speech had been on standby for so long that a bit more couldn't hurt. They had both quite a lot of pent-up stress, and being so close reminded them how lonely they had felt without each other. Yet Quilla's instructions prevented them from doing what they really wanted. Chapter 731. Only Lith's exhaustion saved them from a long, awkward silence. Due to the constant fighting and use of invigoration, he had lost all of his body fat along with part of his bone and muscle density. Lith fell asleep the moment he closed his eyes to sniff Camilla's hair, giving his metabolism the opportunity to fix all the damages he had sustained. Thanks to all the nutrients he had ingested during dinner and Lith's ability to assimilate world energy, his body was rebuilt from its foundations, pushing the impurities within it away from the new tissues and closer to his mana core. Lith spent the next 2 days doing nothing but eating, sleeping, and using accumulation. His enhanced metabolism sped up his recovery, making him regain weight at an astounding rate, but that came with a price. Healing and evolving required a huge amount of energy that Lith decided to take only through conventional means. His choice was based not only on the fact that his recovery speed was already unnatural, but also because in his condition, using invigoration would do him more harm than good. Despite all of Quilla's and Lith's treatments, his life force was still unstable. Forcefully injecting a strength that his body might not have been able to handle, yet was as risky as it was pointless. Aside from the headaches Lith got by standing so close to Camilla, and yet being forced to keep his hands in his pockets, there were no threats in the Urna's household. Also, he had noticed his impurities moving, and by using accumulation instead of invigoration, he could exploit that opportunity. His entire body was being flooded by world energy, rebuilding itself stronger and denser than before. Using accumulation allowed him to speed up the natural process of moving the impurities towards his core so that he would experience the next breakthrough the moment his body was ready for it. It was a win-win situation for him, which allowed Lith to strengthen both his body and mana core at once. Also, it gave him the time to assess his loot from Kulla. He still had in his pocket Dimension Rizzo's Eternal Blade, the bead that activated the God's Will array, but more importantly, the books he had found in the lab's safe. The Urna's household was one of the most ancient and powerful magical bloodlines of the Griffin Kingdom. Their library could easily compare with that of any academy, covering almost all topics known to mankind. It also contained several books about lost languages and all the dictionaries Lith needed to make heads or tails of his possessions. Or better, Solis did, and he just reaped the fruits of her endeavor. They were both overjoyed discovering that one of the books was a detailed explanation of the body-swapping technique, of which the life-merging process was just an incredibly hard and mana-expensive variation. Building the necessary equipment might take a lot of time and resources since I don't recognize half the ingredients listed in here, but this is a great start. Solis had devoted her whole time since they had gotten back to checking Litha's condition and translating the book about body swapping. Agreed. Also, we might not even need all of them. The ODI were stuck with Tier 3 magic in all fields but light magic and forge mastering, whereas we can use all tiers of true magic. For once Lith shared her enthusiasm. Not even he could find a sour note in such a discovery. Sure, there was no certainty that it would work, nor that they would manage to understand the underlying mechanism of the process, but it was a start, more than they had ever had. I'm so happy to have you back, Solis. Lith was brimming with joy like it didn't happen since the day he had healed Tista from her congenital disease. When I thought I had lost you, I almost went insane. I'm really sorry that while we are here I can't spend more time with you, but isolating myself would arouse even more suspicions than my recovery speed already does. Don't worry, we have all the time in the world. I'm not going anywhere, you big oaf. Soulless mana enveloped Litha's body, while her mind pushed her feelings of joy to the fringes of his mind, in what was the closest thing to a heartfelt hug she could give him. By the way, there's something you need to know. Solis shared with him all of her memories about her encounter with Mogur, the existence of the Guardians, and Litha's alleged role during the tribulations. Fuck me sideways, was his first reaction. I don't like this at all. Do you think that Mogur has manipulated me so far? That all the bullshit that happens to me depends on some kind of cosmic scheme? Honestly, no. I didn't feel any malice from her, and I consider myself an expert in recognizing cold-hearted manipulators. Solus replied while looking at Lith first, and then to Journey. She was teaching Camilla about Royal Constable's protocols and revising with her some of the most controversial cases as simulation exercises. Moger also said that it's you who constantly call upon her, not the other way around. I'm more worried about the Guardians. What if they feel threatened and decide to kill you? We don't stand a chance against such powerful creatures. Please, that's foobar paranoia, even by my standards. Lith replied, I doubt that they care about someone as weak as I am, just like I don't stomp all ants I see because they might evolve into something more powerful. We must focus on the good news. Moger didn't call me a monster or an alien, which means that either even this planet doesn't know what I am or that it doesn't care. Also, your out-of-body experience has finally given us conclusive proof that I was right all along. You are human and have a nice C-cup. If Solus had a body, she would have blushed from head to toe. She had completely forgotten about having checked her body back then, and now she had shared all the knowledge she had acquired about her real form. How can you focus on my breast during such a dramatic moment of my life? It's just a memory. We're safe now. Also, cut me some slack. I'm only human, after all. How are you feeling, Lith? Orion's arrival saved Solus from her predicament. She really didn't want to hear Lith's opinion about her build, especially not in the over-aroused state he was. Weak, but aside from that, I feel great. Thanks. Lith was sitting on a bench in the Manors Park, located nearby the veranda where Journey and Camilla were working. After being underground for so many weeks, he really missed the sun. I will never be able to thank you enough for saving my little girls, especially Floria. It was really brave of you to face that monster alone instead of running away once you rescued the rest of the expedition. As I already told Journey, our friendship runs deep. I would never let something happen to them on my watch. By the way, what's the status of the sword? Lith asked. It's coming along nicely, but since I'm really serious about it, it will take some time. I don't think you want something half-baked again. What the actual fuck? What kind of monster Orion is if the gatekeeper was just something he did for fun? Lith thought. Chapter 732. Of course not. After all, you have to compensate me for 3 orichalcum skinwalker armors. You better give it your all, old man. Lith actually said. His smug expression hid his awe at the idea of what Orion could craft for him if he actually went all out. Yeah. Instead of mocking Lith back, Orion nodded. He hadn't forgotten how Lith's armors had already saved her daughters plenty of times. Orion would make the best he could without breaking the kingdom's laws. Royal forge mastering techniques could only be employed to craft authorized equipment. Doing otherwise was considered treason. Lith then decided to strike the iron while it was still hot and exploit Orion's unusual meek attitude. Lith told him about the discoveries about runes he had made during his stay in Kulla, putting the blame for his forbidden knowledge on Neshel and Yandra, while keeping Floria out of it. Dead mages told no tales, and the kingdom could not put dead mages to trial. I'm really curious about runes. Is it a hidden specialization like those that are taught in the academies? How do I get to learn about it? Lith asked. How the heck did you squeeze so much information from them? Orion was taken aback by such a request. I told you, Kulla was filled with old runes, so they had to explain to me how to operate the dimensional runes and counter the golems. Also, my forge mastering analysis spells can detect runes, which made them all the more eager to recruit me for their academies. Lith replied with his usual blend of truth and lies. You're a bit too young for this stuff. The kingdom doesn't accept forge masters who don't have a history of loyalty to the crown. So far, you've been quite useful, but no one thinks that you're loyal to no one but yourself. Orion sighed. What about Floria and Quilla? They already have wands and no runes. What's with the double standards? Kid, do you really want to compare a grassroots mage to an ancient household? Do you have any idea how many people owe me favors? I'm not waiting for the moment of my death to collect them. Since my daughters are interested in forge mastering, it's only natural that I do the best that I can for them. Floria is determined in pursuing her military career, just as Quilla wants to become a teacher for one of the 6 great academies. That's something the kingdom is willing to bet on, at least with me vouching for them. But you? In a year you'll be out of the military, and who knows, maybe even out of the kingdom. Would you give away state secrets to a rogue mage? Orion said. So, you can't teach me, or you just don't want to? Lith asked. Both. but I can at least answer your questions. Rinsmithing is just a branch of forge mastering, just like the bonding process. As for how you can learn about it, there are only two possible ways. Number 1, you commit to the kingdom. Become a permanent military member, an echelon of the Mage Association. Get a role in an academy, whatever works for you and roots you to the kingdom. Number 2, marry into a family important enough to give you access to the resources you want. That's another kind of bond that can't be overlooked and works just fine. Isn't there at least a third way? Learning from an emperor beast or from another rogue mage? Lith asked. Sure, that's not against the law. Good luck finding someone who possesses that kind of knowledge and is willing to give it away for free. Orion sneered at the idea. Any more questions? None that you're willing to answer to. Thanks. Lith stood up and went to the kitchen. He hadn't eaten in almost 2 hours and his stomach was rumbling. While eating a T-bone steak with roasted potatoes, Lith pondered about what to do with his loot. After a thorough analysis with invigoration, he had discovered that the magical artifacts were useless to him. They had a safeguard mechanism that would react to the imprint of a non-ODI, destroying them. Not to mention that the God's Will bead required a mana output that put Silverwing's hexagram to shame. The sword was at least covered in runes that Lith could study, and its pseudo-core was worth replicating. What if we trade the God's Will to the crown in exchange for something? Lith thought. The problem isn't exchange for what? If we give it away now, there's nothing we want, whereas if we reveal its existence later, you could be charged with treason. We have only until you give your report to decide. Solus replied. Those 2 days soon became very boring to him. Not being able to practice magic and being forced to rest was something that Lith didn't experience since his childhood. The only silver lining of that situation was that thanks to Solus using invigoration on Camilla to speed up her metabolism and send the nutrients to the right places, she was recovering almost as fast as he was. Quilla examined Lith multiple times a day to check that his life force hadn't sustained any more permanent damage. She believed that just like Death Vision, Lith's transformation was due to the damage he had received by saving Protector. That maybe their life forces had interacted, awakening some latent trait belonging to one of Lith's ancestors. It was impossible to think that Raz wasn't Lith's father. The two men looked too much alike for their resemblance to be just a coincidence. The truth was that Lith's current condition was due to the abuse of origin flames. The powerful technique required to mix a tiny speck of life force with world energy, but no matter how little it was, it would still put strain on the life force of its user. To fight the ODI, Lith had pushed his body to the limit, resulting in his precarious state. You still need to rest, but tomorrow you might be able to do some light exercise. Quilla said at the end of the second day. Lith's life force was stable, but she would like for him to wait at least another full day to let it settle properly. Lith, I know it's none of my business, but I have to ask you anyway. What the heck did happen in that cave? What was that thing you became? Her voice was genuinely worried. Lith could see from her eyes that she wasn't afraid of him being a monster so much as of being sick. As if his second life force was a disease to cure instead of another mystery in his life. I wonder what did I do to deserve such people in my life? Lith thought. You did the right thing for the wrong reasons, but it's paying off anyway. Be careful about what you say to her. You have yet to speak with Camilla. The more people know before she does, the more it will hurt her. Solus warned him. Beats me, Lith honestly replied. He still had no idea what a world tribulation was nor why he was a hybrid, even though both his parents were humans. It started off back when I went to Candria, but only recently I became able to shape-shift. I don't know how to explain it, but I've got 2 life forces. That's impossible, she said after examining him with scanner again. There is no such thing as a second life force. Chapter 733. Look deeper. The second life force is hidden by the first one. Like a faint melody can be easily covered by loud music. Lith said, Wait, are you saying that you can hear life forces as well? Gods, that's a relief. I was starting to think it was a sign of insanity. Quilla said with joy, having finally found a kindred spirit. What do you mean? I thought that every talented healer could. Manohar is the only one who has no problems admitting that he hears life forces, and as you know, being like him is not considered a good thing. She chuckled, making a second attempt at scanner. Good gods, this is amazing, Quilla said after finally finding Lith's second life force. It looks like that of an emperor beast, but theirs isn't surrounded by a black sphere, nor do they appear to be battling. I've never seen anything like that before, nor she would ever be able to. Scanner required physical contact, and usually, those who touched an abomination wouldn't live to tell the tale. If the human life force looked like a mix of Lego blocks and erector set pieces, while the Emperor Beast life force looked like a burning star, the abominations looked like an empty black sphere. When exactly did you visit an Emperor Beast? Lith asked. Even he had been able to make the analogy only after treating Callus' failed attempt at lichhood. Light magic is something most beasts are terrible at, so when they get injured, the Lord of the Forest sends them to the academy to be treated. I always wanted to understand why magical beasts can use a different kind of magic, and I think the answer lies in the difference between our life forces. They are nothing alike. That's because we are two different species. Lith thought. The difference lies in the beast being born partially awakened but limited to 2 elements, whereas we humans can always use all elements, but we have no innate affinity to them. Lith thought. Your condition is truly unique. Your 2 life forces complement and strengthen each other. This probably explains why you always recover so fast. Quilla said over his musings. Meaning, whenever you take damage, your human life force tries to fix it, like it happens to every other person. What makes you special is that your other life force is capable of helping and nurturing the former by sharing part of its energy. Which means that, at least in theory, not only could it lead to fixing your human life force over time, but also that you might actually live as long as a normal human being. Twice the life force, twice the lifespan. She said, I'm sorry, Quilla, but I think that's not the case. My life forces are intertwined. When one runs out, the other will die as well. Also, if you take a good look at them, they share the same energy. I haven't got double the amount of life force. It just flows from one form to another. Otherwise, the crack I sustained while saving Protector would have already healed. Lith sighed. Quilla used Scanner on him again, this time focusing less on the marvel that a patient with 2 life forces was and more on what the implications of such a thing could be. You're right. It's like 2 bottles sharing the same liquid. Yet it still makes no sense. Quilla was suddenly at a loss for words. She loved Lith like a brother, yet the fear of the unknown started to seep inside her heart. If the second life force wasn't a disease, nor a consequence of saving Protector, then it opened the question about what Lith was. At first, the fear of dying at the hand of the ODI hadn't left any space for doubts, and then, once they returned home, her affection for him had trampled her caution. But now that Quilla was forced to face the bits of truth that Lith could offer her, she didn't know how to react. On one hand, she was supposed to be scared of the unknown being sitting in front of her, but on the other hand, Lith was always Lith. His strange abilities didn't change the fact that he was her first crush, or all the time they had spent together, or the several times he had risked his life to help her, just like against the ODI. Yet she couldn't just shrug everything off as if nothing had changed. Do your parents know? She asked. No. It's not the kind of thing that you can tell lightly. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Do you remember when Orpal said all the time that I'm a monster? Well, guess what? He was right. Lith replied with a sad smile. That's not true. You're not a monster. Quilla blurted out before she could think about her words, surprising even herself. You're very kind, but we both know that most people would put me on a lab table just because I'm stronger than the average Joe, let alone if they knew I'm whatever this is. Lith waved at his body. Does Floria know? Of course she does. I would have never dragged her in a relationship without letting her know the mess she was walking into. It was really brave of you. Of both of you, I mean. Quilla wondered if she would be able to accept as a boyfriend a man something hybrid. Nah, it wasn't bravery, at least on my part. Once I realized that Floria was falling in love with me, that things were getting serious, I revealed myself to her in the hope to scare her away. Wow, that's a dick move if I ever heard one. Almost as bad as breaking up with her with a letter. Quilla said with a chuckle. For a monster, Lith was pretty damn human. You're right. But you know me. Dick Move is my middle name. She deserved someone better, someone normal. Yet she accepted me anyway and kept my secret for all this time. You have no idea how much it meant to me. Were you planning to tell me, sooner or later? No. I didn't want to risk one of my only 4 human friends. Beside you, Floria, Freya, and Celia, I've no one. I didn't tell my parents for the same reason, because I'm afraid of their reaction. Lith said. So, No one beside me and Floria knows? Quilla didn't know whether to be scared or flattered by the burden she now had to carry. Protector knows about it too. As I told you, I've no control over the transformation. It also happened when I was trying to save his life, otherwise I don't think I would have told him either. Why do you think I chose to work alone as a ranger? It's to stay away from people as much as I can. What about Camilla? Curiosity was getting the better of Quilla. She doesn't know it yet. But since we're almost together for a year, I think it's time to break up or move up. With all that has happened between us, I can't let her delude herself or make plans for the future without knowing anything about the real me. Lith had no intention of making Protector's mistakes, nor to play with Camilla's feelings. He had never planned to grow so fond of her, and the idea of losing her hurt like hell. But hiding the truth would have only delayed the inevitable. Chapter 734. Quilla was about to rebuke that Camilla knew a lot about the real him. But this time her mind was as quick as her mouth, and she managed to stop herself. What she was about to say would have been hypocritical since Quilla knew Lith even better than Camilla did, and yet she had no idea how those revelations had changed their relationship. Can I talk about it with Floria? She asked. Yes, but with no one else. There are too many lives at stakes. You have my word that I'll keep your secret, no matter what I decide. Before giving you my answer, I need some time to think. Lith walked out of the room, leaving Quilla alone with her thoughts. For the first time in her life, magic had no answers to offer her, only more questions. That went well. Solus thought, trying to cheer Lith up. Not really. First, she treated me as if I was one of her patients, then as a freak of nature, and lastly, she was scared. The worst thing is that I think that Camilla will go straight to the third step. Maybe I should just break up with her. Lith replied, ignoring the sting that such words caused to his heart. That would be wrong for both of you, but especially for you. It would mean that you can't have a relationship with anyone but Floria, or well, me, if I ever get a body. It took Solus sheer willpower to say that without stuttering. Contrary to her expectations, instead of taking it as a joke, Lith nodded. Camilla and Journey were out working, so he informed Floria of the most recent developments before starting to study and organize everything he knew about runesmithing. I'm sorry it came to this, Floria said. I really hoped you would tell her of your free will instead of being forced to. Don't worry, I'm sure everything will be all right. Yet her words lacked conviction. Lith didn't reply and kept staring outside the window of her room while using accumulation. Even the silences between them were never awkward. They could both tell what the other was thinking just by looking at their face. By the way, since when do you have horns, tail, and all that stuff? Floria asked. Lith told her the little he knew about world tribulations, about how it started in Candria, and how he lacked the ability to control the transformation in such circumstances. He even assumed his hybrid form to show her the differences between his normal and tribulation state. Wait, turn around, she said. What's the matter? Your eyes are not yellow anymore, and there's a blue one opened on your forehead. Yeah, it opened while we were in Kolua's underground facility, but it does nothing, just like the others. Lith shared with her the details about his sudden ability to understand the golem's language and the messages he had received. Thanks to Solus's talk with Moger, now Lith knew that somehow even his understanding of the ODI language was related to his tribulation, just like the eyes and the hands erupting from the shadows whenever he was very upset. The eyes were Moger's consciousness while the hands were the manifestation of the dead spirits around him. It wasn't only his life force to be damaged, but his soul's as well, making it a natural receptacle for necromantic energies. I don't think it's so simple, Floria said. And why is that? Lith had already reverted for a while in his human form. Because your left eye is still black and your right eye is still red. That has never happened before. Your hybrid eyes have always been yellow and the human eyes brown. Lith conjured a mirror made of ice, discovering that Floria was right. A simple thought, and everything went back to normal. Well, that's new. At least I can change them at will. Lith switched them several times from red to black and then to blue, testing the limits and the speed of his control. The question is, what can they do? She asked. Just what I fucking needed right now. Another goddamn change I've no control over. Lith stood up abruptly, looking for something to destroy to vent his rage until he remembered that he was in Floria's room, not his own. I know that there's nothing I can do or say that can make you feel better, but please, remember that if you ever need someone to talk with, You can always count on me. Floria held his hands until the rage and frustration that made them tremble faded. She didn't try and reassure him about how Quilla would react, nor attempted to ease his worries with empty words. Floria just hugged him, holding Lith tight to let him know the only certainty that she could offer to him, that he wasn't alone, no matter the details of his physical appearance in any of his forms. To her, Lith was an irreplaceable person. After witnessing all the pain and anger he bottled up that only his hybrid form could express, after seeing him put his life on the line for her over and over against the ODI, she wasn't scared of him one bit. She only loved him more. The two of them might not even belong to the same race. They weren't together anymore. Yet Lith was always there for her, no matter the cost. And not because he wanted her money or lusted after her body. He simply cared for her. Floria was only 21 years old, yet she already knew how rare finding such a person was, how precious such a blessing was. Lith returned her embrace, wondering once again if he hadn't made a horrible mistake not fighting for her back when Floria had proposed to break up. Oddly, for the first time in years, she asked herself the same question. Maybe Lith was the right person, but back then I was too young to really understand the implications of his secret, and he was too afraid to open up to anyone. We met in the wrong moment of our lives. She thought. Thank you, Floria. Now I'm sorry, but I feel very tired. Back in his room, Lith used accumulation non-stop to assess the condition of his body. Did you notice that every time you use a lot of mana or receive serious injuries, the process of accumulating the impurities in your body speeds up? Solus pointed out, trying to take Lith's mind off his predicament. It was hard to decide what was worse between the risk of losing one of his few lifelong friends and being dumped by his girlfriend, not because of something he did, but just for who he was. Yeah, I think that it depends on the massive mana flow coupled with the complete body reconstruction I have endured. It happened almost the same way after Balkir's attack, Lith replied. I'm nearing the breakthrough, but I can't risk it happening while I'm at the Urna's Manor, nor in front of Camilla. That would mean opening up not because I want to, but because I have to once again. Lith's life force appeared to have returned to its peak condition, but he decided to follow Quilla's advice and take another day of rest, just to be sure. A failed breakthrough meant death or becoming an abomination. Chapter 735. To make matters worse, each breakthrough was harder than the previous ones, and since it was the first body refinement Lith would experience with a blue core, he couldn't take any chance, not with his life force already cracked. I was thinking about Yandra's words. She actually left us a big clue about runesmithing that we have overlooked so far. Lith thought. She used our skinwalker armor as an example, saying that after the bonding process, the orichalcum's mana flow becomes too vigorous to be forge-mastered, which means that runes have to be applied before bonding the material with mana crystals. Lith took the sword and the booklet he had acquired from Huriel out of his pocket dimension. While we wait for Orion to fulfill his part of our bargain, we can start experimenting on the swords. We have 2 blueprints, after all, and we can even try out the patterns in the book. Well, yeah, but those are all old-ass runes. I mean, the ODI's adamant sword is much better than the teaching prop we found, but its runes are even older. The materials needed for the experiments are cheap, but I'm afraid we might just waste our time and learn outdated methods. Solus replied. True. But we can try and experiment with the new runes we know and see how different the outcome is. Orion isn't wrong when he says that it's unlikely for anyone to accept us as a disciple. I doubt that the Hydra will take us in with no strings attached, so the more we know before we meet her, the more knowledge we can squeeze from her even just by a few hints. Lith spent the rest of the time until lunch in the Urna's library, consulting tomes about wardens. Arrays were the only form of magic that used runes, and by comparing old and new arrays, Lith could expand the number of runes from the booklet that he was able to convert into modern magic. Journey and Camilla returned to dine with the family, but since they were following a delicate case, they left soon after, leaving Lith alone with his worries. He would have loved to sneak out and go back to his tower, but each time he watched at his impurities nearing to his core, he was reminded of how little time he had left for a complete recovery. There wasn't much he could do without magic, and on top of that, Quilla had also forbidden all kinds of physical exercise to him. This is going to be the longest day of my life. He groaned. That's not true. You can spend your time with Foria and Quilla, or you could call Freya. I mean, how long has it been since the four of you have done something together? Solus objected. Good gods, Lith, you look wonderful. Freya said. When Quilla told me that you were on the brink of death, I returned home as fast as I could, but you look damn dandy. Lith had already regained the lost weight, but his body had rebuilt itself better than before, with the result of him being less lean and more muscular than before. He suspected that Quilla was right, and that his two life forces somehow communicated. His muscles weren't much thicker than before, but way denser, like they were in his hybrid form to not get hindered by the scales. Freya, it's so good to see you. Not only because you're even hotter than I remembered you to be, but also because I'm bored as heck. Are you coming on to me? She chuckled, because the compliment sounded a little too honest for our usual role play. Has something bad happened between you and Camilla? Yes, it did. Because of my wounds, we can only hug and hold hands despite the fact we haven't seen each other for almost a month. Sorry if I made you uncomfortable. Lith preferred not hugging her this time, limiting their greeting to a handshake. He already had enough headaches with Camilla. Well, let's go get my sisters. The four of us have a lot of catching up to do. Free country of Lamerth, beyond the eastern borders of the Gorgon Empire. I never dared to dream that this day would come true. Bitra, the Raju Goblin hybrid abomination, said. Now that she had moved in the Master's headquarters and had been bestowed the rank of Master Forge Master, she had spent the last month practicing the skills that back in the day had earned her the title of Ruler of the Flames. It was the greatest honor that an awakened Forge Master could receive, and there could only be one per generation. Yet since now Bitra was an immortal eldritch abomination, she would have all the time she needed to reach perfection. There were so many things she had forgotten, and even more still clouded in her memory. Even after consuming her original self, her hybrid body and mind had yet to stabilize completely. Still, even though the Master had no clue about runes or how to smelt very powerful metals, there was very little that their network of human and abomination connections couldn't provide Bitra. After countless explosions and having wasted almost a ton of precious black iron, Bitra had finally completed her first orichalcum weapon. That makes the two of us. Xenogrosh didn't share one bit of Byra's enthusiasm, and neither did her voice. Xenogrosh had spent the past month only eating and training in using origin flames under Bitra's insistence. According to their resident forge master, origin flames could be used to refine any kind of material in its purest form, granting to enchanted items made out of such materials astounding properties. The Master and Xenogrosh had kept this knowledge for themselves and had prohibited Bitra from sharing it with anyone else. Even to the eldest abomination, such secret was either unknown or well kept. The Master had ordered Xenogrosh to help her newfound sister to the best of her abilities, since soon things would take a turn for the worse. The Eldritchs who didn't take part in the monster hybridization project were envious of those like Xenogrosh who had reached the next level while they were still stuck in their old form, and all the other plans of the Master had yet to bear any fruit. Also, they were scared of the clones that had defeated their originals and were now hidden in plain sight, maybe plotting to feed on their weaker kin. The Master was aware that only power could keep such a rough bunch in line, and powerful artifacts would help them reaffirm their authority. Xenogrosh had always used origin flames only as a means of attack against those dumb or slow enough to stand in her way. They were just flames, after all, hence easy to dodge compared to a spell that she could freely move around at will. Bitra had taught her that just like spells, origin flames could be controlled, in order to not have them destroy so much as purify. The problem was that Xenogrosh had no idea how to do it, and Bitra had only vague explanations to offer Xenogrosh based on her memories. Xenogrosh had destroyed a mountain worth of ores before understanding what she was supposed to do and had almost died in the process. Using too many origin flames in a short amount of time had weakened her life force to the point of almost breaking it. Chapter 736. Xenogrosh had been horrified discovering that performing just one more breath would have crippled her troll half, forcing her back to be just an eldritch abomination in a matter of a few decades. The Master had used all of their skills to save her and forbidden her to use them in such a mindless way. Once she had recovered, Xenogrosh had then been forced to learn Tier 5 light magic to keep her own life force in check. After that, she had spent all of her time as Bitra's furnace, gaining the Reiju's eternal gratitude and the mockery of her peers. For a several centuries old being feeling ignorant first, falling ill, and finally being a laughingstock was far from a pleasant experience. Is it good? Xenagrosh asked. You tell me. Baitra handed her what looked like a set of dragon claws. I made it so that you can use it in both your human and dragon form. They will grow in size with you. The silvery glove had 6 purple magic crystals embedded on its surface, one for each finger and one in the middle of its backhand. It shone so brightly that Xenagrosh could hardly believe it wasn't made out of pure adamant. As soon as she imprinted it with her mana, she could feel its several enchantments pulsing at her fingertips. Father of Dragons, this thing is better than my prized adamant blade, Xenagrosh said. That's the best compliment I could hope for. Baitra giggled like a little girl. Where did you find it? I bought it from a forge master for the price of a small kingdom 800 years ago. Well, then it's normal, Baitra said, turning gloom. Back then runes were highly inefficient, and if the adamant hadn't been purified, it's likely to be crap. Xenagrosh wasn't stingy, but hearing her most powerful weapon, with which she had slain countless awakened ones, being called a piece of crap, hurt her wallet deeply. I have a question. Even though I've recovered most of my abilities, I still can't use invigoration, accumulation, and not even life vision. Is there something wrong with me? Baitra asked. No, I'm in your same boat, and I've got no idea how to fix this. Xenagrosh sighed. How long before you can work on good stuff like adamant and davris? Depends. How long before you can purify them instead of just melting them, or even worse, vaporize them? Baitra replied. Oh, fuck me sideways. Again with this crap? Seriously, sister, we need a break. But the master said. Baitra wasn't really interested in following orders, but after longing her forge for centuries, she would use any excuse to practice her art. The master can go fuck themselves for all I care. You keep crafting weapons for us hybrids. We must nip the rebellion in the bud. I'll search for a solution to our common problem. Xenagrosh was tired of studying and learning about her new abilities. The problem of having evolved was that she knew nothing about her new self, making her feel like a child again. With it, fear had returned. Back when Xenagrosh was just a wormling, she had given up on her dragon half to avoid the hassle it implied. Then, when she had later tried to achieve a purple core, she had failed miserably and had become an abomination. Xenagrosh was afraid because the past she had run away from for centuries was finally catching up with her. I'm a fucking dragon again, and I have to study again. This doesn't bode well. What if I fail? I've always failed in everything I did. The master considers us eldritchs to be the top of the evolutionary scale, but to me, we're just the kings of losers. We've lost our bodies, our awakened powers, and even Mogr has turned its back to us. I hope to never have to do this again, but if there's something that I've learned after spending decades with the master, is that there's nothing wrong with asking for help. Xenagrosh flew for hundreds of kilometers until she found a small island in the middle of the ocean. Then, she cast all of her best arrays to prevent anyone from following her signal or pinpointing her position. Only then did she take her communication amulet out of her omni pocket. What Lith called pocket dimension was referred to by other creatures as an omni pocket. Unlike common dimensional items, once someone had imprinted an omni pocket, they could access their storage dimension even though they didn't carry it on them. It made their owner unpredictable and usually only ancient, powerful beings like Xenagrosh had one. They were so rare that even Xenagrosh had not found nor bought her own. It was her coming-of-age gift, the only thing she had left from her past together with her amulet. Her eyes became watery when she saw that only a handful of communication runes were left. Her mother's had disappeared first, then her friends, and even some of her siblings. She hadn't used her human amulet for centuries. Too many memories were linked to it. She activated the first rune she had ever imprinted it with, which belonged to the one who had gifted the amulet to her, along with her omni pocket. Hi, Dad. It's me, Zorith. How are you? Sugarplum, you're alive. You've no idea how many times I've attempted to call you over the years. Ligane said. He hadn't heard from Zorith in a long, long time. She was one of his firstborn, and Ligane considered her to be one of the biggest failures of his life. She had rejected his legacy first, and then his teachings, walking a path of self-destruction before breaking her mother's heart. Commander Barion's office, City of Belius. I've already listened to the reports of all the survivors of Kulla, at least to those which make any sense, except for yours, the Ernazes, and Ranger Varens. Commander Barian said, drumming his fingers over his desk. He was a man in his early 30s, standing 1.8, 5 feet 11 inches, meters tall with pitch-black hair and eyes. His pale blue uniform could barely contain his muscular body, giving to each of his movements an impression of strength. In front of him sat Morok Erie, the ranger ranked first among the veterans and ready to get honorably discharged to return to civilian life. You are the one who fought by Varen's side the most, and you're the only one who didn't get himself captured or killed. Hence your report is of the utmost importance for both evaluating Ranger Varen's worth and the danger that Kulla posed to the kingdom. Morok told Barian his side of the story, omitting parts like his nature as a tyrant emperor beast, Litha's secrets, and Quilla getting the drop on him by kicking him in the nuts, of course. My final conclusions are as follows. All the ODI ruins should be classified as danger zones. We got this close to having those madmen infiltrate our country, and I doubt that anyone would have noticed until it was too late. As for Ranger Verhan, the earlier reports about him greatly underestimate his talents. I've seen him destroying golems stronger than anything I've ever faced before, as if he was squatting flies. Don't get me wrong, he bleeds just like you and me, plus a well-planned ambush can put him in a corner. Yet give him one bit of advantage and he'll turn it into a kilometer. Also, at the cost of sounding repetitive, golems. Chapter 737. Those things are the apex of enchanted automated weaponry, with no weak points nor vitals that one might exploit. Usually it takes a squad of well-trained people to take one down, and Kulla was all made of metal, making it impossible to employ the standard anti-construct strategies. Consider that even though I destroyed as many golems as he did, Morok allowed himself some poetic license to keep their secrets safe. I still had my weapons, whereas he lost his blade at the beginning of the mission. That's the bit of good news. The bad news is that I don't think that you will be able to keep him in the military. He's too good for you. I've seen his forge-mastered creations at work, and they are masterpieces. I believe that Captain and Mage Ernaz wouldn't be alive without the enchanted armor that he gave them, and his glove weapon is simply amazing. The professors bickered like children to recruit him, so I doubt that the measly pay of an officer can be of any interest to him. Morok said, We're aware of his talents as a forge master, but normally soldiers exchange their merits for enchanted weapons. The Army is the only organization that can provide high-level equipment to its members based on their performance. Barian said, Well, there's nothing normal about people like him or me. Morok shook his head. Your items have no allure for him. Even royal forge masters admire his pieces. Money is pointless since he can just sell a couple of his prototypes and make more in 1 hour than you pay him in a year. Remember my words, if you don't feed the bird, then don't cry when it spreads its wings and leaves the nest. One last thing, I highly recommend Quilla Ernaz for whatever position she applies to. She has opened Kulla's door, killed more golems than anyone else, besides Lith of course, and if she didn't deactivate the reactor, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Do you really hold her in such high regard? Barian asked. It was uncharacteristic of Ranger Erie to think about the best interest of the kingdom rather than his own. It was one of the reasons why they weren't fighting to keep him in their ranks. He created almost as many problems as he resolved. I sure do. She's a small but fiery woman. I think I'm in love, he said before leaving the commander's office, who quickly alerted Lady Ernaz of the calamity that could reach her home at any moment. Ernaz's mansion. While hearing the story of their adventure in Kulla, Freya didn't miss how things seemed to be kind of awkward between Lith and Quilla, whereas Floria seemed to be a little too relaxed for someone who had just experienced the first major failure of her career. All the professors and some of their assistants had died under her command. ODI or not, the 6 great academies were bound to not let it slide, with the risk of Floria being punished or even demoted. Even at the end of the story, after they told her how they had combined their strength to wipe the ODI off the face of Mogar, Quilla seemed to be more embarrassed than relieved to have survived such dramatic events. Quilla had never lied to Freya before, so keeping Litha's secret was already a burden to her. Plus, she had yet to make up her mind about their relationship. Being together in the same room forced her to confront her conflicting feelings, making her only wish to be out of there as soon as possible. I'm sorry, but I've to say this. Quilla, why are you squirming on your seat like that? Did you make another pass on Lith and he rejected you, or did you catch them making out? Freya said while pointing at Lith and Floria. What? No. Why do you think I am the one who got rejected? Couldn't it be the other way around? Quilla became beet red from embarrassment, while Lith and Floria just chuckled at the idea. Because you haven't looked so nervous since you had the hots for him, while Lith seems to be worried about you. So I thought that maybe, after spending so much time together in a life or death situation, something spicy might have happened. Quilla's reaction was interesting, but since the other two didn't show a shred of guilt, especially Floria, Freya understood that her guesses were way off the mark. Since no one seemed to be willing to talk about the elephant in the room, she decided to not pry further. So what are you going to do now? I suppose that you two will ask for a leave, while you, Quilla, will apply for some time off. Yes, I hope so. Lith replied. I have plans with Camilla to make up for the lost time and talk about some important matters. Also, I have a lot of studying to do. Lith couldn't wait to start practicing runesmithing and continue his translation of the body-swapping book. Joining the army was finally paying off. He had found both a way to increase the prowess of his creations and maybe the clues for a definitive solution to his reincarnation process. From the little he had managed to understand, body-swapping was as hard as achieving lichhood, but the process had been standardized, making things much less risky compared to undeath. The key differences were that Lith had to build the apparatus and find a replacement body. Its biggest downside was that he would lose his mana core, his body, and even his muscle memory. Yet since he would retain all of his artifacts and knowledge, plus having an awakened human of very long life, he wouldn't be forced to repeat the process often. Who knows, maybe I'll find a way to transplant the rest as well. After all, the ODI weren't awakened and I can rely on modern magic, not their ancient crap. If I can get my hands on real runesmithing, the sky's the limit. He thought. I honestly don't know what will happen to my career. Floria sighed. So, I think I'll use this time to get serious about forge mastering and maybe start learning a bit of warden magic. I don't want to ever feel so helpless just because of one goddamn array. And I'm going to study battle mage spells first and then work on war mage. I'm tired of being completely useless in combat. Quilla said. Boring, Freya replied. All you can think about is studying. It feels like we're back at the academy. I'm currently unemployed, so if the three of you have nothing better to do, then we could do something together. She had expected for her proposal to be enthusiastically accepted, yet its reception was lukewarm at best. Lith had a lot on his plate between Camilla, Celia, and Faluel the Hydra. Quilla didn't feel like spending more time with Lith until she had sorted out her feelings, whereas Floria really needed a break. She had never believed the rumors about Lith being bad luck, but she really wanted some peace and quiet. Okay, fine, oh grumpy ones. Let's ruin our reunion by moping around and holing ourselves up in our respective labs. After all, we just have to wait another 4 years for the stars to align again and have some spare time together. Lith remembered Yandra's dying words about her regrets for always having put her work first, leaving her no time to truly appreciate everything she had. Chapter 738. To make matters worse, he had returned the professor's bodies to the army, but he still had to deliver Yandra's final message to her family. Solus, do you want in, or do you prefer that I leave you in Lucia? I'm sure you'd like to spend some time in your body with Tista and Nika. Lith thought. Until you have a proper weapon again, I'm not going anywhere. Solus replied. Just have her pick something easy. I can agree with your idea with the following conditions. First, we make camp somewhere near a gate, so if bad luck follows our tail, we can always ask for reinforcements. Second, let's do something fun rather than dangerous. Third, and I mean no offense, but I'm not single. I'd really like to spend some time with my girlfriend, especially after risking my life on a daily basis for a month. So nothing too long. Oh my, you groomed Mr. Mean Eyes into a true gentleman, dear sister. Freya chuckled. I'll accept all of your conditions and raise your ante. You can have Camilla join us for dinner once she is done with work. With a gate, it will take her a step to reach us and a warp for us to bring her to our restaurant. Yet, for women and one man seems a bit inappropriate. What if we invite the other ranger as well? Judging by your stories, he seems like a funny guy. Absolutely not. The three veterans from Kola replied in unison. He's obnoxious, even by my standards. Lith said. He's damn rude. Floria said. It took him a week to believe that I'm a woman. Plus, he hits on everything that breathes. Ranger Erie made so many passes at me that if I hear his voice one more time, I might snap. I don't even dare imagine how he would react if he sees you. Quilla said with a bit of envy. She was pretty, but Freya's hourglass figure was a stunner. Floria agreed as well. Because of her relentless rise among the army's ranks and her sister's full-time jobs, she hadn't seen them for more than an hour at lunch for years. Also, she could feel Quilla's eyes staring at her from time to time. Litha's secret wasn't a heavy burden, but it wasn't small either. It was much easier for me to accept his nature. Back then, we were still together, and I think I was in love with him like a teenage girl can be. After seeing so many people die during Nalir's attack, after losing Uriel, I would have accepted Lith even if he was a 5-headed dragon. As long as he was fine and by my side, nothing else mattered. At that point, Quilla was forced to agree. She really wanted to spend some time with Freya, and Floria was the only one that could help her unravel the tangle of thoughts in her head. Freya then started to tell them about how she had spent the last few months. As she had told Lith the last time they had met, she had completely changed her guild's hierarchy. She had kicked out all the mages from the great academies in favor of those from smaller academies after obtaining the right to teach her own specializations to the most talented members of the Crystal Shield Guild from the Mage Association. It had made things quite competitive, but now there was more motivation than envy, and everyone now worshipped her like a goddess. Since most of her lessons would find practical application during their work, usually talent and survival rate went hand in hand. This way those with little talent quit after having a taste of their own limits, while those who stick with me are either really talented or motivated. I was able to apply for harder jobs and successfully complete them. Now that I have people who I can actually trust, I'm finally starting to make some real money. She dropped a bag full of gold onto the table, gloating. It was more than a captain or even a professor would make in a year. Lith would have liked to point out to her how such a sum was less than what he could make by selling a single orichalcum skinwalker armor, but preferred not to ruin her moment. After all, he wouldn't make many of them since he liked to keep his advantage. After chatting a bit more, Lith gave Freya her own skinwalker armor before returning to the library. After talking with Solus about his plans for the future, he had decided to take a look at her past. Orion could really teach a thing or two to most libraries in the kingdom. Not only were the tomes in the Ernez's library divided based on their topic and arranged in alphabetical order, but also each section was linked to a holographic pad. By inputting specific keywords, each pad would notify its user what tomes they had to consult. First, Lith tried to input the name Minadion, but without much luck. After all, for such a research method to work, the pad would have been able to contain a digital copy of all the tomes, which was still beyond the capabilities of magic. Then, he tried with Ruler of the Flames, getting several hits. In all the other libraries he had access to, he had to explain why he was researching such a specific topic, which proved to be quite a difficult feat to Lith since he had no idea who Minadion was. Saying, "It's for a friend," would only get him a sneer and more questions than he was willing to answer. After checking that the system had no internal memory and that there was no surveillance system in the library, Lith put all the tomes inside Soluspedia. He and Solus could immediately search for any information related to her master, discovering an appalling lack of details. The title's meaning seemed to be obscure since many Forge Masters had used it in the past, but never bothered to explain its origin. As for Minadion, it turned out that Solus's memories were correct. It was the name of a woman, one of the best Forge Masters of her era who had lived almost 700 years before and was considered to be one of Locris Silverwing's closest friends. According to Orion's books, Minadion had left behind several powerful artifacts which together formed a set. The picture of the eyes of Minadion reminded Lith of Scarlet's Pants Nez, making him curse when the book just described it as a peerless treasure. There were also depicted a helm as the ears of Minadion, a set of gloves as the hands of Minadion, a mask as the mouth of Minadion, and a hammer as the fury of Minadion. Little was known about her personal life, aside from the fact that she had been born in the Griffin Kingdom, and that even though she had raised many apprentices, none of them seemed to have inherited her talent nor her title. There was no mention of her having a tower or working on forbidden magic. Minadion seemed to have lived in Silverwing's shadow for most of her life. Her friend's achievements were so great that the few historians who mentioned her did it only because the two ancient mages were really close. Chapter 739. The only other bit of relevant information he found was about Menadian's sudden disappearance right after sharing with the magical community the set of artifacts bearing her name. The historians also reported that it had been her, together with Silverwing, to build and project the foundations of all the great academies. Also, even if it was Silverwing's legacy that had allowed magic to develop into the disciplines now called specializations, Menadian was universally recognized as the inventor of forge mastering. Poor woman, Lith thought. She was the Salieri to Silverwing's Mozart. The fact that she was basically a recluse and left no legacy behind doesn't help either. Does her story ring any bells, Solus? Sadly, no. She sighed. I can't believe that there are so many stories between truth and fiction about Silverwing and so little about Master Menadian. It's unfair. She's the mother of forge mastering, after all. It's not like other mages got it any better. Aside from Silverwing, do we know the name of the mage who created modern healing magic? Or any other specialization? No, all professors always quote Silverwing's writings. Lith replied. Solus had to admit that he was right, yet it didn't make her feel any better. At least until Lith walked to Orion's study and asked him about Menadian. How do you know that name? Orion was quite curious. Aside from powerful crafters, very few bothered to remember the name of the first royal forge master, the ruler of the flames who first had tamed all metals with her blazing fury. I'll be honest with you, Lith said, opening his speech with a blatant lie that made Solus laugh her ass off. I was snooping around your library, hoping to find something about runes, when I discovered her existence. It pisses me off that nothing is recorded about her, so I wanted to ask you, a fellow forge master, if there's any tome I can consult about her life. There's no such thing as an official biography about Rifa Menadian. Most of her works are still a state secret, but if you content yourself with some lore, I can share with you all the information available to the public. Lith nodded for Orion to continue, and Orion offered him a seat. According to what I know, she was born in Dirios. Back then the city was just a small-time village, but due to her choice to build 2 academies near her hometown, it soon grew until it became the capital of the entire region. She was rumored to possess an amazing mage tower that she was capable of rearranging as she saw fit. Menadian could turn a bedroom into a kitchen or a broom closet into a perfectly equipped forge mastering lab with just a snap of her fingers. Some even say that her tower was alive, capable of independent thought and movement. Does that mean that she dabbled in forbidden magic? Lith asked, almost causing Orion to fly into an outrage. That's a perversion of magic. No forge master would ever dare to do something like that. Master Menadian was also one of the founding spell breakers. She took down countless scums who dared to mess with her legacy. What I meant to say is just that it was akin to a living being, like an academy. Every single of its stones was enchanted. Its master could reshape it at will, and it was able to self-repair. It was only thanks to her tower that Menadian managed to craft such wonders. After her death, countless mages, human, undead, and even beasts scoured the entire kingdom looking for her tower, but to no avail. The legend says that Menadian's disappearance was due to a demon who stole her fury. Without it, Menadian was akin to crippled, so she searched for it for the rest of her life. A demon, Lith sneered. Aside from himself, he had yet to see anything that even looked like one. Yeah, Orion sneered as well. He believed in demons just like he believed in free meals. It was probably a rival mage who managed to seduce her first and then betrayed her trust to steal her secrets. That or one of her disciples. You know what they say? Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Lith nodded. Is there any chance that you are the demon, Solus? Maybe you stole her tower and she fused you with it as a punishment. Lith thought. What? No. I could never do something like that, at least based on who I am now and the little I remember. She replied, even though she couldn't think of any other reason why a kind person as her master could have doomed her to an eternity of misery. Is there a museum about her? Anything? I would like to pay her my respects. Lith said. There's none, Lith. Orion shook his head. But know this. Every time you work in your forge, you already bestow upon her the greatest honor she might have ever wished for. Every enchanted item you craft, you shape it from her teachings. Know then, that every time you create even the most insignificant trinket, you're following the footsteps of the first Forge Master. The second greatest honor Mina Dion could ever ask is for you to take a disciple. Only those who have learned her lessons and in turn teach them, making it so that a unique innovation can become a foundation for all, can say that they have truly inherited her spirit. I will not lie to you. There are ancient bloodlines and emperor beasts who have their own legacy, but none of them is superior to Menadians. Despite the fact that they might live longer than we do, their numbers are too few, whereas Royal Forge Masters share and improve her teachings every single day, as they have done since she gifted us her knowledge. If you really consider yourself a Forge Master, you should think about leaving a legacy that amounts to more than mountains of corpses and broken buildings. Your feats might one day take one page in history books, whereas your teachings might fill books and, most importantly, shape lives. Thank you, Orion. After meeting you in Yandra, I'm considering the idea of becoming a Royal Forge Master, Lith said with a smile. Orion's words were almost the same Lith had told Morok. On top of that, whatever the Hydra might teach him, it would be the legacy of a single bloodline, and the same would stand for all awakened. A master could teach their disciples, but could the work of a single person, no matter how gifted, compare with the constant work of thousands? Especially since people like Manohar and Balkir existed. A single non-awakened could make runesmithing improve by leaps and bounds, allowing people like Vaster or Marth to find even more applications. Awakened ones, instead, were limited by their small numbers and were unlikely to share their knowledge. At least in theory. Lith thought. Who knows if Awakened had their own Silverwing, or if this so-called council provides to its members a base amount of knowledge. I'm really looking forward to meeting Faluel the Hydra. She will help me determine the next course of action after I quit the army. Or maybe she will just try to eat me alive. Lith and Orion went to dinner together, still talking about any trivia Orion could remember about Mina Dion. Lith was likely to have already got her tower. Menadian's Fury, the prized forge mastering hammer, would have been a fine addition to his collection. Chapter 740. City of Akra, Griffin Kingdom. The news of the fall of Kulla had shed an even more disturbing light around the rogue awakened Lith Verhen, Ragadririan. The human representative in the Council of the Awakened decided that their meeting was long overdue. First, this Verhen has killed Trias, causing the downfall of Master Glamis as well. Then he got caught in the scheme laid by those 6 runts in Xantia, causing the death of 6 disciples and 2 more elders. Usually it takes an all-out war to kill so many awakened in such a short time. To make things even worse, rumors are spreading that he has managed to apply the Skinwalker spell to Orichalcum on his own. It would be a simple feat if he had a master, but according to our background check, he has none. We can't afford to let such a powerful individual remain a rogue anymore. He must be brought into our ranks. Ragu failed to mention that Lady Tyrus had already met Lith in person twice, something that most awakened failed to accomplish during their whole life, Ragu included. What are your orders, Master Ragu? Athung Soranot asked. She had once been one of Ragu's apprentices, now a free awakened and one of the candidates to inherit her legacy. Go to Lusha, wait for Lith, and bring him here on friendly terms. I've no desire to discover how far his power goes, nor to alert the Queen's Core. We have nothing to gain from kidnapping him. Best case scenario, we make an enemy out of him. What about the worst case scenario? Athung tilted her head. She had rarely seen her former master so nervous. Lady Tyrus comes here and slaughters us all. Raga thought. Believe me, you don't want to know, was what she actually said. Erna's mansion, after dinner. Lith was sitting on his bed, working together with Solus to translate the words of power engraved on Huriel's sword into modern runes. Enough pieces of paper to fill a book were floating in mid-air along with several blots of ink that he used to either take notes or make corrections. From the following day, Lith would finally be able to use his own magic instead of relying on Solus's, which meant he would be free to go back to Lusha and make experiments in their tower. Also, he had to plan his visit to Protector and Celia, something that now was of the utmost importance. With the body-swapping book in his possession, Lith could finally plan ahead. The future wasn't so scary anymore, especially since if he managed to conquer the ODI's technology, he would solve his reincarnation problem. If he hadn't joined the army, he would have never got access to the royal library, nor to all the confidential information about the undead. His original plan was to turn himself into an undead, which he had discarded due to their many limitations in movement or use of magic, or to bind his soul to an item. Yet cursed objects had proved it to be an even more desperate plan than becoming an undead, or to achieve immortality. Body swapping wasn't really immortality, but it was still the next best thing. Even if he had to rebuild his body and mana core from scratch, what could a few dozen years mean to someone who would live centuries? Lith, don't you think there's something wrong with me? Camilla asked, forcing him to arrange the papers in a folder with a flick of his wrist before storing them inside Solaspedia. What are you? Great Mother Almighty. Very few things made Lith religious, and that was one of them. Camilla was standing in front of him, wearing only black lace lingerie and a worried expression. Wow, I wasn't expecting so much enthusiasm. It's not the first time you've seen me without clothes after all. She giggled while noticing the sudden rush of blood to his head. May I remind you, I spent a whole month fighting against unspeakable horrors, risking my life every single day while surrounded only by old coots and stinky soldiers? I'm not used to such beauty anymore. You should have given me some warning. Camilla would have loved to keep flirting, but her worries couldn't wait. I've been pale for weeks, yet in the last 2 days, not only am I back to my regular complexion, but I'm also gaining weight. Haven't you noticed? Lith had a hard time, and not only at not noticing her smooth skin and soft curves. That's because since I've returned your mood has improved and you eat more. He replied, yes, but this fast? I'm already amazed by how quickly you recovered, but I've never had a shred of your inhuman constitution. How do you think it's possible that the only places I gained weight are here and here? She said while touching her bosom first and her buttocks later, giving Lith a monstrous headache. The answer was a bit of invigoration and light magic from Solas's side that had enhanced Camilla's metabolism. Solas's intention had been to simply help Camilla to assimilate the nutrients and quickly relieve her body from all the stress it had sustained. Since Camilla was still young and very fit thanks to Journey's training, the results had far exceeded even Lith's expectations. That might be my fault, he admitted. Do you remember those disgusting tonics we both had to drink? Camilla nodded. I think they might have turned our famished bodies into this. He took off the upper part of the skinwalker armor, showing his upgraded body to her for the first time. Well, I'm not going to complain, as long as you swear to me that this isn't any form of body modification. I'm your girlfriend, not your toy, correct? Camilla's voice was soft, but her question held a lot of implications. She knew about body sculpting, and seeing her physique change so fast had made her fear that Lith might have gone overboard. Seeing his honest surprise had greatly reassured her, but she still wanted to hear it from his mouth. I did nothing to your body, nor would I administer you any potion without your consent. I'm shocked as you are. This actually adds insult to injury, making what I'm about to say even more painful. Lith sighed. What's wrong, baby? After all this talk about my body, I thought you would be happier to check out how much stamina I've recovered. She sat on Lith's lap, rubbing her body against him while kissing him with growing passion. Quilla thinks that I should rest today as well, to let my life force stabilize. He moaned with a mix of pleasure from Camilla's movements and pain from the words coming from his own mouth. Seriously? After worrying about you for an entire month, after 2 whole days of holding myself back for this moment, do we really have to postpone again? She nibbled at his earlobe before kissing her way down Lith's neckline. Yes, unless you want to risk taking a few years off my lifespan. He pushed her away before his mind went completely blank. Is it really so dangerous? Camilla stopped abruptly, becoming as stiff as he was, afraid to hurt him. Sadly, yes. The silver lining is that once the sun rises, I should be good to go. Chapter 741. Yeah, too bad that I can't take tomorrow as a day off. We're in the middle of a case. Damn if I hate being a responsible adult. Camilla went into the bathroom, replacing the lingerie with a baggy pajamas. That makes the 2 of us, babe, Lith said before taking a lonely cold shower. The following morning, Lith left the Urna's household. Quilla's scanner confirmed that his life force was now no different from how it had been before. There were no new cracks, and the old ones hadn't grown any bigger. Once he was back into his tower, Lith took all the loot he had gained from Quilla out of his pocket dimension, letting Solas prepare their forge while he called Protector. Scourge, what happened to you? I tried to call you multiple times to remind you of your promise. At first, Celia bugged me because she thought you were avoiding us, but over time she got so worried about you that she almost forced me to visit your parents and ask them about your whereabouts. Protector was relieved from hearing Litha's voice. As long as the owner of a communication rune was alive, their rune would remain, but not seeing Litha's amulet active for a month had brought Protector to the point of thinking that he was held captive and unconscious. Lith told all about the events in Kulla to Protector, explaining that going deep underground had blocked all communications. Life in the wilderness was quite boring, so Celia's hologram appeared as well, sitting on Ryman's lap along with their children, listening to Litha's story as if it was a fairy tale. Lith was amazed by how quickly Protector hushed the kids' ears during the most gruesome parts. Then, Lith asked for their help. I would like to introduce Camilla to the four of you. Well, any kind of company is most welcome, but can I ask you why? I thought you wanted to keep your life as an awakened a secret. Celia asked. And I mean to keep things that way. Learning about awakening might put her in danger. My issue is about leaving her in the dark about my other half as Protector did to you. In a while, we'll have our 1-year anniversary. I don't think it's fair to drag things this long without giving her the opportunity to decide if she wants to stick with me or find someone more normal. Lith sighed. You are the only mixed couple that I know, and seeing how she reacts to your situation would greatly help me to understand how open-minded she is. So, you're asking us to reveal our secret before gambling on yours? Celia asked. Lith hadn't shared his hybrid nature with her, but the Huntress had actually guessed a lot from the subtext. Yes. Lith nodded. Fine by me. What about you, dear? Celia asked Protector. Wait, what? Both men said in unison. Ryman trusted Lith so much that any friend of his was also Protector's friend, otherwise he wouldn't have revealed himself so easily to Freya. Why so surprised? It's obvious that I'm interested in checking if all humans are scumbags. You are now in the same situation my children will be in a few years. I'm not doing it just for you, but also for my family. By the way, if she breaks up with you just because of what one of your ancestors did, she doesn't deserve you. Celia said, believing that Lith carried the blood of an ancestral emperor beast. It's kind of more complicated than that. Lith replied, Are you going to tell me? Not now? Otherwise she would be the fifth one to know, which would make things even harder for her. Especially considering that my ex already knows. Slow down. Are you saying that you already found a girl who accepted you in the past? Celia cut him short. Yes. Actually, too. Lith thought since he considered Solus a girl, too. And you let her go? I'm not going to lie, kid. That was a dick move on your part. When do you think you'll bring her here? As soon as I can. She has a full-time job, and so do I. Finding the right time might be tricky. I plan to do that first, and then visit Faluel. As you can see, I haven't forgotten about my promise. After another bit of chit-chat, and receiving from Celia the magical equivalent of a grocery list of enchanted items she wanted as a spontaneous gift for her troubles, Lith joined Solus in their forge. She had already placed several cheap swords and all the lower-grade mana crystals in their possession above the obsidian table that they employed for their experiments. She was in her humanoid form, wearing a simple blue dress with a knee-length skirt. I hoped that after our bodies fully regenerated, I would look even a tiny bit more human, but I'm still glowing like a frigging bedside lamp. She sighed. My physical appearance must be linked to my mana core. Well, you still look gorgeous. Lith said, Are you sure you don't want a body? With my current knowledge about constructs, undead, and even body swapping, we could easily fetch you something. Damn sure. Now let's get to work. I've already organized a few things for you to look at. First, the ODI's runes on the blade are more advanced of those we found in Heriol, since they don't glow, but I think they are also less powerful. I've drawn you a comparison between all the rune-engraved weapons we managed to examine with Invigoration, including Florius. What? When did you do that? Lith was flabbergasted. That was the kind of dirty trick he would usually employ, something that he wouldn't expect from the kind-hearted Solus. The moment we got stuck in Kolua's lower floor and the life of everyone depended on you. I studied all the artifacts left around while the others rested. I did it only because I thought that learning about runes might boost our chances of survival. She replied as the lights in the tower turned red in embarrassment. As I was saying, Even though the ODI blade has a pseudo-core as strong as Floria's, the entirety of its surface is covered in runes, whereas Orion used barely 30 runes in total. Are you telling me that Orion is already able to do much better than the ODI? Lith's shock almost made his mouth fall on the floor. Well, it's no surprise if you consider that he is likely to use state-of-the-art magic, whereas the ODI stopped making any advancement centuries ago. Floria's blade is just made of orichalcum, yet it would have been able to take the ODI on equal footing even if the other one used an adamant sword. The main difference between the two weapons is that the ODI's was designed akin to a mana blade. By pumping the mana they receive from the reactor into it, the sword can be turned into the rough equivalent of a laser blade. Solus explained, I wish I could imprint it and discover its powers. It would be a huge step in understanding how runes work with different enchantments. I can't even fuse it to retrieve the damn adamant. Lith cursed the ODI and their self-destruct mechanism. Maybe, and maybe not. Solus said with a triumphant smile. Rather than give it away to the Griffin Kingdom in exchange for pocket money and a handshake, we might as well try to purify it with origin flames. Chapter 742. Great thinking. My control over origin flames is still crappy, but since adamant is very resistant and hard to find, we might as well try and see if it can withstand the flames. Maybe adamant will be destroyed like normal metals, but maybe it could be just cleansed from the previous incantation. This will have to wait though. I'm not going to use origin flames for a while. I don't want to take any chances of weakening my life force before it fully recovers. Lith said, Right. I'm sure that your decision has nothing to do with you not getting laid once since your return. Solus's voice oozed sarcasm. Lith dodged the question by starting to craft runes, stumbling upon their first hurdle. Engraving one rune at a time seemed to have no effect. They would retain his mana just for a few seconds before turning into just a fancy inscription. He then tried to use bonding to give the blades a mana flow of their own, yet the runes engraved before the bonding remained inactive, whereas the ones engraved after the procedure would actually weaken the item's mana flow. Seriously, what the fuck? Lith said after wasting quite a few crystals. He could buy the blades in bulk, but mana gemstones were another story entirely. Yandra said that runesmithing is part of the preparatory phase. Then why does nothing work? Remember that we are attempting to reproduce the work of fake mages. They can't do things in steps like we do. Maybe if the network of runes isn't complete, it can't hold the power they are imbued with. Solus pondered. I disagree. Look at this junk. Lith showed her the blueprints of the only 3 rune-engraved swords they had, pointing at the old blades. I could understand if we were talking about Orion's blade, but the others? Both swords are covered in so many runes that I can't think of a single fake mage with enough mana to carve them all at once. Sure, the ODI had the reactor, but this blade was clearly crafted before its construction was completed. With runes, adamant, and infinite mana at their disposal, the ODI would have never settled for such a small pseudo-core. Fine. Do you have any better idea? Solus tapped her foot. Her hands were planted on her hips. No. Then give mine a try. Since it was still early in the morning and runes were his new priority, Lith did as instructed. He reproduced the runes of Huriol's sword, which had the simplest rune pattern among those at his disposal, on a new one down to the last detail. The result was impressive. All the runes shone with power, not only retaining the mana Lith had employed, but also absorbing the surrounding world energy to empower themselves. Soon they were even stronger than both Lith and Solus had predicted they would be. Told you so, Lith said, throwing his latest failure inside the safe room. Any decent forgemaster had their lab connected to a room where to throw their faulty products in case they detonated. Unlike most of his colleagues, however, Lith had Solus put a reinforced glass between the lab and the safe room, so that he could observe the deterioration process of his creation until its bitter end. It had allowed them to more easily understand what had gone wrong and why. Lith used the technique he had learned during his stay in Kula, making invigoration move through the stone of the tower so that he could study the sword with his breathing technique from a safe distance. In normal circumstances, it would have been an impossible feat. The further the subject was, the fewer details invigoration would perceive, to the point that even life vision would be better. Yet the whole tower was part of Solus's body, and she was in turn part of Lith. It greatly boosted his new abilities' range and effectiveness. Plus, Solus could replay all the events he spectated, allowing him to focus on different aspects of his failure just by performing an experiment once. Yeah, but it was worth a shot, Solus said. She had never expected to succeed at the first try. There was a reason why runes were a state secret that not even most awakened were aware of. Any idea what's gone wrong? Off the top of my head, at least a dozen. Lith replied. Hey, that's my shtick. Just to be sure, I'll try out one of the spells that Floria has marked as mere teaching props. Lith ignored Solus's remark and took the booklet out of his pocket dimension. Some of the simplest enchantments had pictures showing what the final result would look like. Lith couldn't read the ancient language, nor had he found a dictionary for it. But now that thanks to Floria he knew it wasn't anything dangerous, he could try and replicate the depicted runes. To not waste any more materials, he used a stone slab as a medium and engraved the words of power according to the scheme in the booklet with his own mana. Once again, the runes started to grow more powerful and unstable by the second, but since there were much fewer of them, the safe room was useless. The resulting explosion shouldn't be able to harm him. Do you see that? Lith pointed at different runes that were pulsating in unison. Yes, Solus said, turning back into her wisp form and storing her dress. She had no skinwalker armor, and she loved her clothes dearly. It appears that there are at least 2 different sets of runes. Each set tries to connect with its components, but they both fail because the mana pathways they create mess with each other and cause the energy to overload. My thoughts exactly. What we believe to be a bunch of separate objects are actually all part of the same structure, like an oversimplified array. Lith tried to store the stone slab inside his pocket dimension before it detonated, but to no avail. The haywire energy was rejected by his storage space. Damn it. It would have been nice having a few live grenades of that magnitude ready to blow. Lith said, maybe we should apply runes to alchemy as well. I don't think it's possible, Solus pointed out. Most alchemical tools are made of pure mana, whereas runesmithing takes place during the preparatory phase. Wands are an exception since they have a physical medium, but we don't know if runes might interfere with the spell-infusing process. Point taken. We'll think about it later. They spent the following hour by studying the recording of the explosion of the sword, separating the different sets of runes based on the rhythm at which they pulsed. It took them a few more failures to iron out the last details, since if a rune was surrounded by the components of another pattern, its frequency would mimic their own and screw up Lith's predictions. Once they were done, Lith could discern 3 different sets of runes on Huriel's sword, at least 5 on Floria's, and too many to count them on the ODIs. He even managed to perfectly replicate the weapon from the Lost Academy. Well, the good news is that now we know that runes have to be engraved in sets, and that a single one by itself is useless. The bad news is that even with this knowledge, we have no idea what each pattern does. Lith said, Chapter 743. Yeah, we still know too few runes to decipher a whole pattern, and on top of that, I think that even if we know the modern equivalent of some power words, either we alter the entire set or we leave it as it is. We have no idea how ancient and modern runes interact, but if I had to take a guess, I'd bet that they go boom. Solus said. After a quick experiment that proved her right, Lith decided to study the 3 rune patterns he knew by engraving them on 3 different blades. Much to their surprise, all the sets worked as amplifiers, but each one had a different function. The first set would enhance Lith's energy signature, so that the mana flow from the crystals embedded into the blade offered a bit less resistance to the forge mastering process. The second set amplified the strength of the pseudo-core, while the third set dispersed the excess energy, so that the cheap metal could withstand the energy that the enchantment released and reduce the stress that the boosted pseudo-core would experience. The 3 sets combined allowed the magical item not only to avoid mana overload, but also to replenish its energy reserve faster than normal. The runes absorbed the surrounding world energy and aided the mana crystals to empower the pseudo-core. Fascinating. Now I understand how Thrud could use such powerful artifacts freely. The runes act as a lesser invigoration, shortening the recharge time of both mana crystals and power cores. Lith said, Yeah, too bad that we know only bottom-tier sets of runes, and we don't have a copy of Floria's sword to detonate. Solus was cut short when Lith suddenly doubled over in pain. Not now, damn it. he said while a familiar burning sensation rose from his mana core and moved towards his throat. Lith knew that his breakthrough was close and that the more mana he employed, the sooner it would happen. What he had failed to take into account was that, while he was inside his tower, part of the energy from the underground mana geyser flowed through his mana core, further speeding up the process. Soon his whole body started to undergo the refining process that allowed an awakened one to get rid of the impurities hindering both their mana flow and life force, allowing them to obtain a physique strong enough to handle a new and more powerful mana core. This time, however, things were different. At first, Lith puked a huge amount of tar-like substance that had reached his core. After that, the deep blue core became brighter and started to pulse like a star. By my maker, now I understand what impurities are for and why Tista needs help every time she makes a breakthrough. Impurities are a double-edged sword that both protects and damages the body. On one hand, they hinder a person's development and enhance the signs of aging, but on the other hand, they are a natural inhibitor of the mana flow. Without them, normal people would die the moment their bodies are not strong enough to bear the power of their own cores. Solus thought, impurities move toward the core because the closer they get, the more effective they are, and once the core gets rid of them, the body is forced to evolve or die. Removing Tista's impurities while she grew up made her develop a body that doesn't need to break as much as a normal person's would to be refined. At the same time, however, because she has too few impurities, the process is more violent and quick compared to Lith's. To help her to survive her next breakthrough, we need to force her body to produce more impurities, whereas Floria's case is the opposite. We must remove part of her impurities and force her body to rearrange itself enough to not get broken beyond repair when she awakens. Lith's now blue mana core sent one pulse of energy after the other, like a beating heart. Each wave hammered at the impurities present in the rest of his body, forcing them out. First, his hair and nails fell entirely. Then his muscles were ripped and his bones broken, so that the impurities hidden even in the innermost layers of his body were laid bare and expelled. His body kept breaking and reforming non-stop, as if a rough surgeon was working together with a merciful healer to excise the black masses infesting every fiber of Lith's being. Thanks to the fight with the ODI and having a much denser body, this part was relatively easy and less painful than his last breakthrough. Alas, his inner organs proved to be more difficult clients. Even shutting down one of them at a time was a near-death experience that put Lith's endurance to the test. The only silver lining was that each time one of his organs was reformed, it would greatly improve the amount of mana and life force that flowed through his body, making the recovery of the other organs faster. It's really amazing, Solus said. Now each one of your organs, your skin included, is an extension of your mana core. We could even rename them mana organs since now everything you do is actual magic. Yeah, but if my brain has already gone into the dryer, why do I still feel like crap instead of just tired as usual? Lith asked. His skin, nails, and hair had already finished regenerating, so the body refining was supposed to be over. The answer came in the form of a new series of spasms that caused him to shapeshift uncontrollably back and forth from his human to his hybrid form. This doesn't make sense, he thought. This form is mostly made of energy. It doesn't even run on blood. What kind of impurities can it have? Lith's 7 eyes, even those that were still closed shut, shed black tears while his scales fell off as if he was a molting bird, revealing a fiery red skin lying underneath his hardened shell. Yet unlike the human impurities that would just leave Lith's body, all the so-called defective parts gathered up on the side of his head and at the end of his spine before bursting into flames. Where before there was nothing, small curved horns and a short tail appeared. New, thicker scales replaced the old ones while 3 rays of pure elemental energy erupted from Lith's opened eyes, flushing out more and more impurities. Lith's hybrid form was born from an already evolved body which possessed a powerful core, so it was perfect. What it lacked was the ability to channel the full power generated by the constant battle between his Emperor Beast and Abomination life forces. Lith's hybrid body was too small and weak to withstand the full scope of such powerful conflicting energies. Lith's human body would break just to be reshaped into a more suitable host for his core, whereas his hybrid form was forced to grow so that it could unlock its true potential. Emerald flames suddenly burst out Lith's every pore, but instead of hurting him, they nurtured his scaled body, making it grow bigger and taller until it almost stood 3 meters, 9 feet 10 inches, tall, before reverting to his normal height. Once everything was over, even though Lith had just spent 3 full days resting, he was on the verge of starving, incapable to move a muscle. Chapter 744. Quilla saved your life by forcing you to rest for one more day. If this happened yesterday, your life force would have shattered. Now, instead, it's stronger than ever. Solus said, observing with invigoration how the boundaries between Lith's mana core, body, and life force had become thinner. The 2 different kinds of energy now flowed through his veins along with his blood, making him different from normal humans. I know, Lith stuttered. Solus, promise me that no matter what, you'll wake me up for dinner. Yeah, sure. What could the changes in your body possibly matter compared to a night of wild, steamy, hot sex with your girlfriend? By the way, I take back what I said yesterday. I'll stay here in Lucia while you have fun. There's no reason for me to. I'm hungry. He cut her short before fainting. Oh yes, there's that too, Solus said while carrying Lith on his bed with spirit magic. She had developed the nutrients potion exactly for that kind of situation, where invigoration couldn't help Lith, and feeding him the old-fashioned way was impossible. They tasted like crap and smelled almost as badly, but it was much easier administering them to an unconscious man rather than feeding him a full-course meal. Solus's mouth almost fell to the ground when she noticed that Lith was absorbing the potions like a dry sponge water. Damn it. The mana geyser is boosting his metabolism to the point that if I don't keep the nutrients coming, by the time Lith wakes up he'll look like a monk after a month of fasting. Invigoration could do nothing to help Lith recover faster, and even if it could, Solus wouldn't have used it. She hoped that the changes both of his life forces had experienced could heal the crack that cursed Lith to a shorter lifespan, or at least get rid of death vision. It wasn't a skill so much as a curse that made his life miserable and constantly drained his focus just to keep the visions at bay. Only when he was alone with Solus inside the tower could he relax without worries. That, or when he was alone with Floria. It really irks me to no end that I'll never know if it's just because I'm seemingly immortal or because Lith has feelings for me as deep as he has for her. Right now, even the members of his family suffer from death vision if they are further away than 3 meters. He never allowed himself to see if things work the same for Camilla as they do for everyone else he loves, or if she's an outlier like Floria. I guess it would mean a lot, and Lith doesn't want to second-guess their relationship. Solus thought. She remained by Lith's side until his condition stabilized, feeding him potions and checking on his life force from time to time with the scanner spell. Yet the cracks remained, and even though his body brimmed with vigor, the amount of life force Lith had remained unchanged. Solus sighed, saying goodbye to her broken dream before using both invigoration and mana sense on Lith. Now both his liver and kidneys were capable of detoxifying most harmful substances as if they were a Tier 2 cleansing spell. With each regular breath Lith took, his lungs drew bigger amounts of world energy than before, filling his chest with mana that his heart would pump through his whole body along with thin streams of life force that enhanced his recovery abilities. Only when she was certain that the breakthrough would cause Lith no harm did Solus leave his bedroom, calling her friends to make plans for the night. Uninhabited island in the middle of the ocean. Ligane had failed to understand why his long-lost daughter had gone to such lengths to prevent him from tracking her position, at least until he took a good look at her. He couldn't use Soul's vision, and the Guardian's ultimate form of life vision, on a hologram, but all of his regular senses picked more than enough anomalies to make him suspicious. Xenogrosh, who he knew as Zorith, was supposed to be already dead, or at least very close to the end of her lifespan. She had chosen the human nature, so even if somehow she had managed to awaken on her own, there was only so much time it could have bought her. Yet her body was full of vigor, her skin didn't show any sign of aging, and even her heart was off. Mostly because he could hear 2 of them, beating rhythmically like war drums into his ears. Her body was too slender, her movements too gracious to be human. Let me guess, you are one of those abominations who fused with their monster doubles, and yours was a troll. How can you have stooped so low? Ligane asked. Xenogrosh cursed her bad luck. She was aware that tricking her father was a fool's errand, but she had hoped that her deception would at least last the few minutes she needed to obtain a few answers from him. Nailed it in one. Sorry, Dad. I know I've always been nothing but a failure in your eyes. I guess it's better to end this conversation right now. Her voice was honest. Since the call had started, Ligane didn't perceive an ill intent coming from her. Zoratha's words stung hard, reminding him why he had such a poor relationship with most of his children. Too often in the past he had treated them as a guardian would rather than a father, something that he had tried to correct in his relationship with Melia. Why do you say that? I've never considered you as a failure, he said, trying to stop her from ending the call. Oh, please. You could never forgive me for picking my human half over yours, or the fact that even though I grew in your cave, I wasn't able to awaken by myself like so many of my siblings did. Xenogrosh's finger was still above Ligane's rune, yet she couldn't find the strength to push it. Is that what you believe? Ligane was flabbergasted by the depth of his failure as a parent. Of course. Otherwise, why did you never look after me once I left your lair? Why didn't you awaken me? Her voice didn't sound like that of a murdering monster so much as that of an abandoned child. Because with both your words and actions, you made it clear that you wanted to have your own space. As for the awakening, do you realize how short a human's lifespan is? If you had chosen to be a dragon, I would have had more time to understand your character. Awakening someone is a big deal, and you were so hot-headed that I feared that power would get the better of you. The state you're in just proves that I was right, Ligane said, his voice shaken like it didn't happen in centuries. Yet you didn't hesitate to awaken that empress of yours. Guess that's true what they say. You can pick your friends, not your family. Xenogrosh's voice oozed poison. You know, the reason why I joined the Master is that unlike you, he at least gave me a chance. He took his time to know me, even when I was just another horrid abomination before tagging and bagging me like you would. Chapter 745. I never wanted for you to see me in my fallen state, forcing you to hunt me and put me down like a rabid beast. That's why I never answered your calls before, and I wouldn't have contacted you if I wasn't desperate. Guess what, almighty Ligane? The only thing you were right about me is that I should have chosen the dragon side of the family from the beginning. Xenogrosh's shape shifted into her shadow dragon form, flaunting a size that rivaled with that of her father. Her right hand was covered by Bytra's sky-piercer claws, which pulsed with the same fury that possessed their master. Ligane's eyes moved from his daughter to the familiar design of the weapon she was wielding, finally understanding the meaning of Mogur's words during Litha's last tribulation. The threat they were facing was beyond that of the usual madman aiming for eternal life. Whoever this master was, he had somehow managed to upset the balance as Ligane knew it. The dragon eldritch hybrid in front of him was proof of that. What do you need my help for, dear? He asked. His voice was calm now, and there was no judgment in his eyes. Xenogrosh was so shocked that she returned to her human form without even realizing it. For the first time in her adult life, Ligane was speaking to her like a father instead of a guardian. Xenogrosh was several centuries old. She had seen Mogur change in ways she deemed impossible. She had fought the most powerful creatures that roamed the planet without batting an eye, yet she couldn't stop herself from stuttering. Hating Ligane the Guardian was easy. Hating the father who had read her bedtime stories when she was little, who had taught her almost everything she knew about magic, was another story entirely. She felt incredibly stupid for revealing her envy towards the Magic Empress to him, for yelling like a petulant child while flaunting her hybrid form as if it was a new toy. She had emitted such a powerful energy signature that Ligane would probably be able to track her if he wanted to. I'm feeling so lost, Dad. She fell on her knees, crying. I started this because I wanted more power. Because I wanted to become powerful enough to show to this stupid planet that it made a mistake by abandoning me. For a magical beast, turning into an emperor beast meant that Mogur had accepted them. That was the reason why they would receive its help to shed their old form and be granted a painless evolution. For abominations, turning into an eldritch was the lowest point. It meant that Mogur had completely cut them off from the natural order of things, relegating them to a state lower than the fallen races. They could at least still evolve, whereas an eldritch was the end of the line. Yet after spending so much time with the Master, after I stopped living like a beast, thinking only about eating, surviving, and becoming stronger, I realized that power is not what I really want. What I truly wished for was to be freed from my hunger, to enjoy little things like smelling a flower without it wilting at my touch. Now I'm so close to getting back everything that I lost. But no matter how much I struggle, I can't overcome this new wall, and I'm scared of screwing things again. She sobbed, making Ligane's heart tighten. What's the matter, sweetie pie? Then Xenogrosh told him everything about her twin core and her inability to awaken or to access to any of her old abilities. Do you know what's wrong with me, Dad? I tried all the breathing techniques I learned over the years, yet all I've achieved is the feeling that if I make one wrong move, my new core will overload and my new body will be lost. She said, and you're right. The Master's crazy experiment has simply created bodies and cores capable of withstanding the chaos energy that normally ravages an abomination's physical form, but it didn't cure your status as an eldritch. I'm sorry, Zorith, but you've been deluding yourself. You are still far from being normal. The troll core is incapable of processing the darkness energy, just like the black core is incapable of processing the light element, which creates a symbiotic relationship that allows you to maintain your human form. But that's it. Both of them are still fallen cores, so they cannot awaken. Any attempt on a fallen core will make it burst and fall prey of the black core, killing you on the spot. I don't think you can survive anymore without the troll core. You've changed too much. Ligane said. Wow, fallen cores? Do they really exist? Xenogrosh wiped her tears while Ligane nodded. I can't believe it. I lived together with the most ancient beings on Mogar, guardians excluded, and no one was able to understand what was wrong with us. Yet you solved it all just by looking at my hologram. Can you cure me, Dad? Honestly, and I don't say this often, I don't know. You're a new life form, so it would take me some time just to understand what you've become, but I'm fairly optimistic about your condition. Ligane said while thinking about Lith. The anomaly was an abomination hybrid as well, yet he hadn't fallen, had been able to awaken by himself, and was living a full life, even walking the path to guardianhood. If I could get to study how his mana core and life force works, I could cure my little girl. Yet I can't afford to let her know about his existence. As long as Zorith associates herself with the Master, she's a liability to the balance. He thought, really? Do you think you can help us? Xenogrosh said. Her eyes were full of hope. The others? Maybe. I need to see them to be sure. You? Absolutely. But first you have to tell me the Master's identity and where I can find the Eldritchs. I can barter such information with the other Guardians in exchange for your safety, but I can't make any promises about the others. Ligane replied, Are you really asking me to betray my family and the only person who ever gave a damn about me since the day I fell? Xenogrosh's hope vanished, replaced by her usual determination. They are not your family. They are worse than undead. Eldritchs are crazed beasts that destroy everything they touch. Each one of them has made more victims than the entire vampire race. As for the Master, he's not any better than an Eldritch. The number of living beings sacrificed for his mad experiments is in the millions. He can't be allowed to exist. Mogar can't afford another Arton Griffin. Then what about me? I'm an Eldritch too. What makes me so different from the other abominations? If it wasn't for me, the Master would have never learned about the secrets of awakening, nor about Arthon's madness. Xenogrosh said, By the Great Mother, you're my baby girl. That's the damn difference. I protect countless lives every single day. Humans, beasts, undead, plants, and the only thing they have in common is that I don't give a rat's ass about them. I can afford to be egotistical from time to time, especially when my family is involved. Come back home, and I promise you that I will do all I can to save you. Chapter 746. I'm sorry, Dad, but I can't do it. They may be monsters to you, but to me they are precious people who need me. I've come too far to turn my back on them like that. Xenogrosh sighed. Thanks for your help, Dad. I promise you that I'll use what you've taught me today to make you proud. I'll find a way to redeem my race in your eyes. I hope that the next time you see me, I'll be whole again. She turned the communication amulet off before warping to random locations to make herself untraceable, unaware that there was no need to. Ligane considered it his parting gift to his daughter, since the next time they met they were bound to be enemies. I've got bad news and terrible news. Which do you want to hear first? He said after activating his mind link with his fellow guardians. The bad news. Tyrus replied. I know why the Master knows us so well and who has helped them with Arthon's madness. My daughter Zorith is among his hybrid eldritchs. My condolences, old friend, said Salark. If I meet her on the battlefield, I'll try to give her a painless death. The terrible news is that among her peers, there's even Baitra, the fourth ruler of the flames. Zorith was wielding one of her weapons. Fuck me sideways, said both guardians in unison. The inventor of modern runes? The same Baitra who taught us how to unlock the true potential of Davris. Tyrus asked. She had always believed that Baitra had disappeared due to the tragic consequences of her never-ending quest to find Menadian's legacy and beat the mother of forge mastering at her own game. No guardian would have ever thought that Baitra's passion could have turned into an obsession, leading her to become an abomination. Yes, and that's not all. Just like the anomaly, the Master's experiments have allowed my daughter to tap again into her draconic nature even though she discarded it centuries ago, back when she was still a normal hybrid. Not only is this supposed to be impossible, but also if the same happened to all the other Eldritchs, there's no telling what kind of bloodlines we might have to face. As you know all too well, some Eldritch predate even us Guardians. Only silence followed Ligane's words. Some of the fallen races had obtained great powers before devolving into madness. The idea of such powerful creatures combining their might with the wisdom of millennia and with the chaos energy that only abominations could wield made them worry. Solus Tower, 8 hours later. Despite the fact that the mana geyser and his tower were supposed to enhance his recovery speed, when Lith woke up he felt as if someone had stopped time the moment he had closed his eyes and then buried him under several steamrollers. Guess I would have been out cold a full day if this had happened in any other place, he thought while yawning like a bear ready to go in hibernation for winter. The first thing he did was check his pocket watch. Luckily, there was still plenty of time to snack and go back to the Urna's mansion. The second thing he did was to investigate the source of all the noise he heard. The moment he tried to focus his attention, Lith could almost feel as if something inside of his head clicked. He could now distinguish all the voices and the smells despite the several closed doors that stood between him and his guests. It seems that Solus invited Tista and Nika at the tower, he thought. Pain aside, one of the last things he remembered before losing his consciousness was taking the skinwalker armor off to more easily get rid of the impurities. So Lith made sure to be presentable before opening the door of his room. Big sister, how nice of you to visit. Yet when I was bedridden, you didn't show up, he said. Not everyone has a magical tower that moves freely through space. She replied with fake rage before hugging him. I was too far from the nearest gate and too busy clearing a couple of dungeons to return. Especially after hearing from Solus that you simply needed rest and that you would pick me up later. Why dungeons? Lith asked. I need real battle experience, and I prefer fighting known monsters instead of putting my head inside the dragon's lair like you always do. I always go alone, so that I can practice both fake and true magic according to the circumstances. Spotting things from a distance with life vision almost makes things too easy. Almost. She shuddered at the memory of a couple of her recent near-death experiences. Tista had learned the hard way that monsters could be awakened as well. Hi, sweetie, Nika said, and judging from the red content of her glass, she was being literal rather than flirty. Gods, you smell delicious. Thanks, I guess. What's all the ruckus? Solus wants to beat the crap out of me. She says that it's the best way to temper my body and fill it with impurities to delay my next breakthrough as long as possible. Tista replied. Solus then brought Lith up to speed about her most recent discoveries about the body and mana core refinement process. Excellent news. This will allow us to greatly improve Floria's survival chances. By the way, how do you feel, Solus? Lith asked. The quality of my nourishment has greatly improved, but even though I used accumulation during the last few hours, it's too soon for my own breakthrough. I really hope that something will happen the moment I graduate from deep to pure green. Solus said. Excellent news, my ass, Tista said, interrupting their daydreaming about the content of the second floor of the tower. I'm not a fan of pain. To add insult to my future injuries, I will not even be allowed to use invigoration after getting beaten, since it would rejuvenate my body and make most of the imperfections that light magic leaves disappear. You can always use darkness fusion. Lith shrugged. Also, I think that it's better to be prepared than dying the moment you experience a breakthrough during our absence. After eating enough food so to stave off his hunger, Lith and the girls practiced together Silverwing's hexagram. After seeing the wargs use it as a learning tool for Awakened while they were under Teska's influence, Lith had applied the same method to both groups he supervised. Solus's friends and the Emperor beasts living inside the Tron woods that he had awakened would regularly practice the array. It served as both a means of defense and to learn the finesse of manipulating different elements. Usually, it required one person for each element, and there were only 4 people in the tower, but with Litha's level of mastery, managing 2 elements at once was an easy job. The exercise required that the awakened ones practicing the spell would cycle the control of all elements, while keeping their mana output at the same level. For Tista, it was an opportunity to learn by imitation how Lith handled his mana flow. Solus was at Litha's level in terms of control over the elements and magical knowledge, but she appreciated the training to build teamwork. She hoped one day to be capable of leaving the tower and experience the world together with her friends. Chapter 747. With her weak mana core, Solus was the benchmark of the group, except when it was Nika's turn to handle light magic. It was always a vexing experience for the vampire and her blood core, requiring her to feed often. Yet she needed to do it in order to better understand the powerful darkness magic that flowed inside her body instead of blood. Usually, Lith would use the gathering to share his knowledge and further strengthen his foundations of magic, but this time he focused on himself the most. The problem with breakthroughs was that he needed to get used to his new strength, both physical and magical. The array exercise allowed him to learn about the changes his mana core had undergone and how to regulate his mana flow without causing an explosion while trying to light a match. After a while, he and Solus Tower warped back to the Urna's mansion. He needed to make sure to not kill the next person he hugged, and Orion's training dummies, which had the same durability of a human body, were the perfect subjects. Much to his surprise, the guards at the gate had a message for him. "Great Mage Verhin, you have visitors from the army waiting for you in the lounge. Yet Lady Quilla needs to speak privately with you before anyone else. She's been pretty clear about this point." Lith nodded and went to Quilla's room, where according to the guards, she was waiting for him. "I wonder what she needs me for. I doubt she has already made up her mind about me being a hybrid. It's more likely to be related to the army's envoy. Probably she wants to make sure that our versions about Kullia's events match." He thought. "I've got your message. What's the emergency, Quilla?" Lith asked. "I never got the opportunity to return this to you," she replied, handing back to him the book about the mana reactor. Quilla was so nervous that she was unable to stop fidgeting. Even folding her hands didn't help. "That's hardly a reason to be worried." He shrugged. "No, you don't get it. We're about to give our report. If I hand this book to the army, they'll ask me where I got it. Since I was held prisoner, I'll be forced to tell them that I got it from you." And Lith kept missing her point. "And once the army explores Kulla and founds the safe near the ODI's life pod, they might wonder if such a big container was really meant for a single book. In their shoes, I would expect to find all the information regarding all the ODI's successful projects, not just one. You could end in trouble because of me," she said. "You're right." He nodded, moved by her concern. Her brain seemed to have a hard time making a decision about their friendship, but her heart didn't seem to care. "Thanks, but there's no reason to worry. I was going to hand over to the army everything that I found back there anyway. That kind of knowledge is toxic, but it's not up to us to decide what to do with it. You're really a genius, little one. There were really 3 books in that safe," Lith said while ruffling her hair out of habit. Back then he had been in too big of a rush to hide the safe before the fight, and there had been too many witnesses once he had regained consciousness. He couldn't expect everyone to be dumb, blind, and deaf, so he knew all along that it was a matter of time before he would be forced to choose between giving up on the tomes or being charged with treason. Lith had already copied the contents of the body-swapping book, so he no longer needed the original for his purposes. Quilla became stiff under his touch, yet she didn't push away his hand. "I've done my best to read and translate the book about the mana reactor, to make sure that there's nothing written in there that might help you with your life force," she said. "Thank you for your kindness, but it was clear that such a monstrosity couldn't help. I couldn't be sure until I read it." She cut him short. "Countless times wrong things have been modified to do some good, but sadly this is not the case. You were right. The reactor can only be used to produce mana, not life force. By the way, These are the ODI dictionaries that I've compiled during my studies. Some of the terms they use do not have an equivalent in our language nor in modern magic, so most dictionaries can help you translate a poem, but most of the magical jargon gets lost in translation. Quilla handed a couple of books thick enough to stop more than one bullet to him. Feel free to borrow them. Aside from you and me, no one knows that I wrote these vocabularies. Quilla had never underestimated Litha's intelligence, so she was well aware that he might as well have made copies of whatever he wanted. It was her way of telling him that if he needed to research the ODI language, the army might take notice if he started to consult ODI magic dictionaries, and that even though she wasn't sure if she wanted to help him, Quilla didn't want him to get caught either. "What are we going to say to the army's emissary?" she finally asked. "The truth." "Well, mostly," he quickly added after noticing her flabbergasted expression. "We'll tell them that we defeated that monster together and that I did most of the job." Damn, this really feels like being back at the academy. Litha's attempt to make her laugh failed. Quilla's expression became even more serious and her feet restless. "Is it because you're not human that you're this strong? Like when you saved Uriel from the assassins, or when you killed the abomination in the forest?" she asked. "No, I told you. I wasn't able to shapeshift back then," he replied. "Have you ever considered us as your friends? I mean, for real? Or was even that a deception?" "The truth?" Lith asked, and she nodded for him to reply. "Not at first, and not for a long time," he said, making her turn pale. "I don't expect you to understand how hard my life was, nor how thick-skinned I am. Yet I want you to know that after Balkir's attack, I started to grow fond of all of you, and that now I consider you one of the few true friends that I have." Lith stored the dictionaries inside his pocket dimension and then told Quilla how he was going to explain the fight with the ODI to the army's envoy. She was amazed by how short and precise his report was, not finding a single weak point in it. Lith and Solus had prepared it together, interrogating each other in turn to find plot holes in their story. In the doctored version of the events, once the mana reactor had been shut down, the three of them had employed hit-and-run tactics to make the enemy ran out of juice by exploiting the ODI's need to take them alive. In this story, Floria had detonated the body-swapping machine only to inflict the death blow. It explained everything, from how they all survived to all the battle marks that remained in the room. Chapter 748. To make everything fit, the only thing they had to lie about was how much mana was left in the reactor. Once Lith went to meet his guest, he was surprised to see that Constable Griffin had come to see them in person. Not only because sending a member of the royal family was a clear indicator of how serious the events of Kulla were considered by the army's upper echelons, but also because a constable meant more an interrogation rather than a report. Lith wasn't worried. Floria knew what to say because they had discussed the matter when he had gone visiting her the previous day, and even if Quilla was still on the fences about how to react to his nature, she had just proved how much she cared for him. The butler led Lith to the tea room for esteemed guests, where Journey, Orion, Floria, and Constable Ernest were waiting for him. It wasn't the tea room the family normally used. Its furniture was more formal, and the seats more spaced between them. Comfortable padded red sofas and chairs were arranged around a white elliptical oak low table. A soft white and silver carpet covered the floor, preventing the moving chairs from making noise and muffling all the sounds that the servitude might make while serving the guests so that nothing could disturb the conversation. The east wall consisted of a glass wall that allowed the morning sun to illuminate the room and make the many silvery ornaments spread throughout the room shine like jewels. On the west wall, there was a huge fireplace surmounted by a huge mirror with a golden frame that covered most of the wall. Lady Tyrus was exactly as Lith remembered her. Time didn't seem to have any effect on her appearance. Finding the whole family assembled for the report was quite odd, but Lith hoped that it was just the deference an old bloodline was supposed to show to a member of the royal family. Tyrus Griffin wore the uniform of a royal constable and was 1.76, 5 feet 9 inches, meters tall. She was a woman in her mid-20s, or so it seemed. There was something about her that made her look young, yet ancient at the same time. She had shining golden hair braided into a tress long enough to be twisted and knotted above her head, resembling a crown. Her silver eyes sparkled like stars under the morning sunlight. Most men found her beauty intoxicating, but to Lith it was unsettling. Such a degree of perfection in her forms, in the symmetry of her features, was simply too good to be true. He gave her a deep bow the moment their eyes met, using it as an opportunity to hide his suspicions and wear his usual poker face. Much to everyone's surprise, Lady Tyrus stood up at his arrival and offered him her hand. "Ranger Verhan, I had heard that your injuries were quite severe. I'm glad to see that you're recovering so well," she said with a dazzling smile. The moment Lith shook her hand, Tyrus used Mother Earth, her version of invigoration, to skin both hybrids at the same time. Mogur seemed to be interested in Solus as much as she was interested in Lith, so it was time to give to Manadian's desperation the attention she deserved. The black hybrid's mind was a shattered, incomplete puzzle, the pieces of which were fighting to fit each other without falling apart. Some cracks had disappeared. Empty gaps between spaces were now filled by small, yet growing pieces, showing the healing process Lith was still undergoing. The white hybrid's mind, instead, was whole, but with multiple cracks that seemed to have grown over time. Just like Mogur had told her guardians, Solus's memory loss, coupled with the lack of a physical body, had prevented her to have any semblance of normality in her life and had deeply affected her mental state. Interesting, Tyrus thought. His body has further evolved after the events of Kulla. His second life force is now more distinct, and the wall between it and the human life force seems to have thinned, unlike how it happened to my children. Normally, the more a hybrid grows stronger, the more apart their life forces grow until one of them has to be sacrificed to allow the other to thrive. In Litha's case, instead, they have moved closer. I've seen it happen in the past. It could mean that either the two life forces will clash for dominance, in which case Litha's life will be at risk, or that they are trying to fuse. If the latter happens, then Mogur is right and he would be really moving towards becoming his own species. Also, Litha's core is not a fallen one. On the contrary, it presents an extraordinary affinity towards the fire and darkness elements. There is no sign of unbalance. The light element flows through his body as well, preventing chaos energy from being formed and harming his body. As for the woman in the ring, she's truly unique. She possesses only one life force, yet I can feel she has two bodies and two cores as well. The tower's core is part of her body, just like her own mana core, and they have been bonded with means like I've never seen before. Yet she's not a cursed object. Neither she was sacrificed to give life to the tower, nor she's enslaved by it. She a true human artifact hybrid, and the only reason she doesn't have two life forces like Lith is that items do not have life force. Her condition allows her to control Manadian's artifact in ways that not even the first Royal Forgemaster could. She and the tower are one, making the girl more than human, yet less at the same time. Quilla Ernaz is the only healer of my generation that I acknowledge as my equal, and the Ernaz family has treated me very well every time I needed help," Lith said, appreciating the soothing warmth that Tyrus's skin exuded. Looking into her eyes was almost as staring at a placid lake during a morning spring. It made him feel at peace and almost lulled him into staring at the golden reflection of the sun on her irises. Almost. "The Ernaz truly are one of the founding pillars of the kingdom," she said while turning around and giving a deep bow to the masters of the house. "The crown is deeply indebted with you, and for your unwavering loyalty, you have our gratitude." Seeing an involuntary nervous spasm on Journey's face was something unprecedented, no matter if it had lasted barely a split second. Clearly the situation was as odd for them as it was for Lith. Yet for Tyrus it wasn't odd, just nostalgic. Orion and Journey came from two of the most ancient bloodlines that had been established together with the Griffin Kingdom. Their ancestors had been founding members of the Queen's Corps back when Tyrus was still queen and Valoran's dear friends. Juria Ernaz and Ogrim Myrock hated each other so much that it had taken their families centuries before considering their oath of never mixing their blood just a legend, leading to Orion's and Journey's marriage. Being inside the Ernaz's tea room was a trip down the memory lane to her. While the Ernaz couple reminded Tyrus of her long-lost friends, Lith and his companions reminded her of herself. Lith was just a candidate guardian, but she could feel that their bond ran deep. Chapter 749. "Why don't you sit down while we wait for the last member of this meeting to join us?" Tyrus said, pointing a padded chair near to Floria at Lith. The Guardian was intrigued seeing that both hybrids were broken beings, even though for completely different reasons. Quilla entered the room soon after Lith. Her surprise was big as well, but her poker face wasn't up with the rest of the family standards. She stuttered when Tyrus stood up to greet her, and she tensed so much that even Lith would have suspected she practiced forbidden magic if he didn't know better. There's no reason to worry. Tyrus chuckled at her reaction, making everyone present swallow a lump of saliva. They all knew that a constable's reassurances were mostly smoke and mirrors. This is a friendly hearing. I assembled you here because I know that you're all tired, but I need to hear from you how you dealt with the last of the ODI. This should be the quickest way for you to give your report and go back to your deserved rest. Tyrus said. Floria took the initiative and told only the truth, at least until the part where she and Lith had remained alone with Jyra in the body-swapping room. Too many people had witnessed the first part of the fight, and she had no idea what they had reported. She undersold the gravity of the injuries Lith had sustained, but kept the rest accurate. After that, she stuck with the story they had agreed beforehand. Tyrus didn't interrupt her nor asked questions. She just stared at the other two and studied their reaction. Lith was as calm as Quilla was nervous. Tyrus's setup was as simple as it was effective. Since they have had all the time to forge a story, by putting them all together and in front of their parents as a reminder of the consequences that lying would have, Constable Griffin could find the weak link in the group. Unfortunately for her, Lith just nodded from time to time, whereas Quilla was so nervous that she never stopped fidgeting, even when Floria told the truth, making it impossible to understand the reason for her discomfort. When it was Lith's turn, he told her how he and Morok had reached the reactor and how he had found the safe. Lith also handed Tyrus the 3 books and the God's Will Array bead. After carefully studying the artifact, he and Solus had realized that now it was just a piece of junk. Not only did the bead require the reactor to be fueled, but also half of its runes had to have been carved into the ODI's enchanted life force. Without them, the bead's pseudo-core had slowly started to crumble. With just the mana pathways inside the artifact, the pseudo-core was unable to sustain its existence. Did they ever leave your storage items? Did you make any copy of their content? Tyrus asked while putting them away with her eyes staring into Lith's. No and no. I made no copy. Much to Tyrus's surprise, he was telling the truth. When dealing with opponents of Journey's caliber, Lith knew that even he couldn't afford to lie. That was the reason he had stored them inside Solaspedia, to never have to take them out, and why he had let Solus do all the work. A fight was a messy, unpredictable series of events, so it was hard to discern facts from fiction, whereas simple yes or no questions were much harder to lie about. Quilla told her all about her experience with the reactor and Morok, including the kick which had prevented him from partaking in the final battle. She was quite relieved having to speak nothing but the truth since, just like Lith, they didn't repeat what Floria had already told Tyrus. I'm glad to hear that despite the dire circumstances you experienced, you've managed to keep a level head. Captain Ernest, you have failed to protect the professors, but judging from the reports of the other survivors, it's already a miracle that so many people made it out of Kolo alive. Tyrus said, the failed mission will go down in your personal file, but it will not affect your career. You have my word. Mage Ernest, you took part in the mission as an assistant, and yet your contribution overshadows that of most professors. I'll make sure that the White Griffin Academy compensates you properly. Ranger Verhan, you have played your role splendidly, yet there is only so much that the kingdom can do to award you, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here. This matter is even more pressing due to the excellent references that Ranger Erie gave you. Are you still unwilling to claim a land as your own? Lith nodded. I suppose that the same stands for your career in the army or the association. More nodding ensued. Is there anything in particular that you want? She asked. I've seen the Royal Forge Masters at work, and I'd love to study their art. Lith replied. I'm sorry, but no. Tyrus shook her head. You've been given plenty of chances to become an integral part of the kingdom, yet you always refused, remaining at the fringes of the system. Even right now, you're like a wolf that circles around a village and refuses to be domesticated. The Griffin Kingdom, or any other of the 3 great countries, cannot put a wolf to guard the henhouse. It's too dangerous. I can grant you free access to the Royal Library, mana crystals, anything that money can buy, but nothing more. I've come personally here today to assure you that the Crown holds you in great esteem and hopes that you'll decide to become one of its keystones in the future. Yet right now you are too young, and too many people question where your loyalty lays. The kingdom can't afford to disclose its secret to someone that might use them against it. We would love for you to take this country as your home, but the choice is up to you. Feel free to contact the embassies of the other countries. You'll discover that your situation there would be the same. Tyrus had spectated to the whole fight, so she knew the truth without the need of listening to their reports. Also, she knew that Lith was withholding Rizzo's adamant, eternal blade. On one hand, it proved that he was a smart and resourceful man, capable of inspiring the loyalty of those around him. On the other hand, however, it made him a thief that had pushed two of the most talented young mages of the kingdom to commit treason. They both knew about the sword, and yet neither of them had mentioned it to protect their friend's secret. Sure, they had no idea what Lith could make out of that sword, but that didn't make him any less dangerous nor their crime any less severe. Yet Tyrus decided to let it slide. She was an enforcer of the change, not of the law. Also, she was pretty sure that Mogur had assembled all the three guardians of the Garland continent to spectate, even though one would have been more than enough to wipe out the ODI, to make them aware she had plans for Lith. Chapter 750. I really hope that Lith understands how important the few years he has left with his friends are. Tyrus thought. Without roots, a man is nothing but a leaf in the wind that life is. My beloved Valeron didn't abdicate to prevent others to discover about his long life. With me by his side, there was no one that could threaten him or our children. He left all that he had fought so hard to build simply because he had no one to share it with anymore. He loved me dearly, and so he loved our children and grandchildren. But after over a century, he couldn't stand being a relic of the past, nor seeing our kids become old while he remained young. Valeron begged me countless times to awaken them, and that was his only plea that I could never fulfill. It broke his heart, and almost our relationship. Yet it was Arthan's treachery that killed him. He could never recover from the guilt of having chosen the wrong person to stand on the throne, and it's the reason why he asked me to select the rulers in its stead, even when he was still alive. Before leaving, Tyrus shook everyone's hand and told Lith to call Commander Barian when he had decided about what he wanted as his reward. I must say, Salark is right. I have to get out more often. I truly enjoy seeing the kingdom thrive and knowing the descendants of my old friends. Yet Ligane is also right. I must pick another human form. I'm sick and tired of people that check out my ass, make me a marriage proposal, and sometimes do both at the same time. She thought while warping to Salark's home. Tyrus wanted to share her impressions about the two hybrids with her before going to Ligane's place. Since he had heard from Zorith, he had become obsessed with finding a cure for his daughter. That was definitely out of the ordinary. Journey said with her eyes semi-closed while she searched her memory. I've never heard of this Constable Griffin, not even after becoming an Archon. To make matters odder, I was certain to know every member of the royal family, yet I would surely remember a person this peculiar. She was so powerful and intimidating that I had a hard time keeping my composure, said Floria. Not to mention that she made me feel like a really ugly duckling. You and me both, sis. Quilla sighed while all the implications of Tyrus's words were slowly sinking in her brain. Not that. I mean how she spoke about Floria's career. It's not a constable work to decide how a failure will be handled by the High Command, no matter if they're members of the royal family or not. Just like the Queen doesn't mess with the army, the King does the same with the association. Yet she spoke on behalf of both of them. Either she is the middleman of the royal couple, or she has been sent here as an eye candy to sway a certain someone. Journey said while looking at the unfazed Lith. Orion had something to add, but then he remembered about Journey's presence, and his brain activated before it was too late, allowing him to turn the very poetic words he was about to say about Constable Griffin into a harmless. I told you so, Lith. The kingdom will pay you handsomely for your services, but gold can only get you so far. Otherwise, you can only rely on your own research or a stroke of luck. Lith considered the purple crystals he had gotten from Kulla, his gold coins funds, and the adamant in his possession. A truckload of gold sounds nice, but what I must really aim for are metals and crystals. The mana crystals we found in Kulla are rough since crystal smithing had yet to be invented, but that's the least of my problems. Sure, if Solus is right and Origin Flames can cleanse powerful materials from the residual traces of failed forge mastering attempts, it means that I have enough adamant for both a sword and an armor, plus I can try as many times as I want. Yet not only is that a big if, but it also is pointless unless I find some blueprints for runes. Based on what both Yandra and Orion told me, without runes I can't bond crystals to adamant, and without crystals, I can't infuse powerful enchantments. He thought, well, we got back from barely 3 days. Let's rest and recover before using origin flames. I don't want you to lose one more day of lifespan. Sola said, you are right, Orion, but no matter how well the kingdom promises to treat me, I prefer flying solo. I've got enough time that I can rely on luck for a little longer. If push comes to shove, I'll probably ask you as my mentor. Lith smirked, and I'll be glad to refuse. Orion smirked back. I'm already too busy between my duty and my apprentices, so unless a royal decree forces me to take you in, you'll have to look for another master. Speaking about time, it's damn late. I have to go. Lith ignored Orion's remark. According to his pocket watch, he was going to be late for dinner. He left the room with a brisk walk while he and Solus organized their days between research and experiments. Time. That word triggered something inside of Quilla, who had never stopped fidgeting ever since Constable Griffin had summoned her. Floria, I need to talk to you. Can we please go to my room? She said. Floria nodded, and the 2 young women left the tea room as well. Those were 2 more things I didn't expect to see today after a member of the royal family actually bowed to us. Quilla lying to a royal constable, and you refusing to take Lith as your apprentice. Do you mind explaining? Journey asked. I'll be honest with you. I like the kid mostly because he cares for our girls, but I don't trust Lith farther than I can throw him. He pulled too many miracles out of his ass during the years. First his sister, then Balkir, then Nalier, and now this? I mean, he was an extra in the expedition and ended up saving the others. Plus, there's the matter of orichalcum and skinwalker armors. I'm a royal forge master for more than 20 years, and I never managed to pull that. Heck, even the royals commissioned some of their equipment from me. The fact that he dumped my little flower is another minus on my book. Orion replied, grunting loudly. Geniuses are just like that, dear. Our daughter faced Nalier as a student as well, and it was her dumping him. Journey rose an eyebrow at his reaction. To her, Lith was a friend and a priceless asset, the best combination she could ask for. He should have fought for her instead of moping his way out of her life. Also, he's no genius, and we both know it. Manohar is a genius, Balkir is a genius, and they are both completely out of it. Lith is too normal to be in their ballpark. He's as magically talented as me and as devious as you are, dear.